Chapter 41 Minnie's strongest hit, Happy Dragon Boat Festival. It's too early to give up. Laurent Minnie stood up at some point. Her right foot was still twitching unconsciously, and she could only touch the ground lightly. The person looked really embarrassed, but these words successfully made the fighting spirit of the recruits still standing on the field surge up. Yes, it's too early to give up. Tony pushed Simon's hand to support him. His eyes were full of fighting intent. I have a secret move, which takes a minute to build up. With this move, I put the sea that attacked the town. Captain Thief, offering a reward of 5400 Bailey's big pirate beheaded on the spot. First, I explained the power of the skills to everyone to appease the military. After a pause, Tony continued, Minnie, Simon, and everyone from the boot camp. Please, even if we lose, we have to leave some souvenirs for Loya. There is no need to explain the words. Simon and Minnie looked at each other, nodded firmly, and greeted the recruits who were still standing around. Everyone. Hold on to Loya. Oh. Copy the guy. After eliminating all the ice wolves in the field, there are only a small number of recruits who still maintain combat effectiveness. But in the face of the terrifying Great Demon King Loya, no one flinched, screaming and following the two swarmed up. Huh. These guys. Loya looked sideways slightly. Even if the strength is not good, this fighting spirit is still quite good. However, I expressed certainty in my heart that Loya would never release water. He put his hands on the ground, and the surging cold air rushed frantically in all directions. Well, I didn't plan to use this trick, but I think it's better to make you despair sooner. Ice make ice field. Click. The cold air rushed through, and countless recruits were instantly frozen in place. Those who were lucky enough to jump up and hide, fell down and could not stand still on the smooth ice. For a time, the recruit who was still aggressively charging just now was directly stuck in the throat, and the person who fell on his back. However, this does not include the top 10. Even if the recruits this year are very weak, they are still recruits from the headquarters. The future achievement is not a lieutenant or a colonel. The backbone of the Navy, no matter how weak, can avoid the simple freezing move of Loya. Unless it's really too close to react in time. For example, Laurent Minnie, she found in despair that her feet could not be lifted. This is not the ice field skill of Roja a month ago. Whether it is the freezing speed and the hardness of the ice, it is not comparable to the original. Watch out, Minnie. Suddenly, Simon shouted, picked up a machete on the ground, and threw it out. Call out. The long sword cut through the air, with a piercing, high-pitched whine. The target was Loya, who was preparing to deal with Minnie with one fist. The speed of the machete's lacing was like lightning and flint, which made Loya's expression solemn. Devil fruit, it really doesn't make sense. The guy with more than 100 physical fitness in the boot camp can throw such a speed. If the iron sand thrown by Simon was just an ordinary bullet, now this machete is the laser of Kobo, and the speed is simply unreasonable. When the speed is fast to a certain extent, the standard machete made of Fanti will not be much duller than the supreme knife. Moreover, Simon had obviously calculated before the throw, which just blocked Loya's forward pace, and even a slight deviation would reveal a flaw and let Loya succeed. In just an instant, he had already reached Loya. It's a brilliant sniper skill. With a sigh, Loya had to give up the attack in desperation. At the same time, he turned around and fired numerous ice spears, knocking over the recruits who were approaching for a sneak attack. While Loya was dealing with the trash fish, Simon came to Minnie's feet. His raised fist was black. Armament hockey. Minnie said in surprise, then quickly covered her mouth. But those eyes were full of curiosity, and a pair of beautiful eyes looked at Simon, as if he could speak. Simon shook his head. No, this is not the time to talk about this. They can't delay it for a minute, let's go. Boom. The sound of shattering from behind startled Loya. He looked back and saw that a leather shoe was coming straight at him through the smoke. Shoes. Simon, there's nothing to throw. No, it's Minnie. Loya was about to make a joke when he saw Minnie rushing out of the smoke. How did she get out? Although Luoya was puzzled, his hands were not slow, and he opened his hand to take Minnie's surprise attack. Little did they know that was exactly what Minnie wanted to happen. With one foot caught, Minnie rolled in the air, using the strength of her waist and abdomen to volley vigorously with the other foot. Accumulate, accelerate, and infuse with all your strength. The black-brown sea animal leather shoes gave off a scorching aura, and the flames wrapped around the leather shoes, leaving a dazzling linear UV light in the air. Mountains. Blast. Boom. Like the sound of a cannonball exploding, the splashed smoke and dust flew up, wrapping Loya in it. Did it work? The recruits all looked forward to the center of the field. Minnie was like a goddess of war in their hearts, and the golden light was overflowing. But the next moment, everyone saw the change on Minnie's face. Ah! The screams sounded again, and Minnie fell to the ground, rolling over her cramped right foot. In the smoke, Loya's faint voice sounded, "Kick my handsome face again, and I will point you to Izumi, asshole." What? Even when she fell to the ground, the twisted hamstrings brought bone-shattering pain. Minnie didn't look away. The attack just now was considered the strongest attack he had erupted over the years, so it should be no problem to leave a memory for Loya. But when she heard Loya's calm tone, Minnie's eyes widened, looking at the smoke in front of her in disbelief. Suddenly, a huge ice wing stretched out from the smoke, and under one fan, the gust of wind blew the smoke away, revealing the unscathed Loya. In other words, Loya, who was not injured. I saw that the ice armor on Loya's right face was shattered, and the ice crystals fell from above. The battle was going on, and Loya was broken for the first time by the ice armor. Sengoku looked at Laurent Minnie, who was lying on the ground, and smiled with satisfaction. "Yes, it's really good. Zephyr, this time is not as bad as you said." Just how hard Loya's ice armor is, he knows very well, and the information revealed by Kuzan and him in small talk made him gasp. It was a defense that was stronger than steel, and even he needed 3 layers of strength to break it. And now, Roha's strength has increased again, and the defense of this ice armor can be guessed to what extent. Thinking about Sengoku makes me feel sad for the recruits. At this moment, Minnie actually shattered Loya's defensive ice armor with just her kicking skills. This strength is worthy of recognition. Although Sengoku expressed his satisfaction, Zephyr was still worried. But do you know how old Minnie is this year? She is 31. Before the age of 40 is her peak period. In a few years, how far can she grow in the future, don't you? Clear. Well, the big deal is to find her a devil fruit to eat. Although the top 3 this year are indeed a lot weaker than the previous ones, except for Simon, none of them have devil fruit abilities, so there is still a lot of room for growth. Garp nibbled at Senbei and said indifferently, but he didn't notice that Zeph's face was getting more and more ugly. Sure enough, the next second, Zephyr burst into flames, pulling Garp's neckline and spitting. "What do you know? Devil fruit is a product of the devil. Your own strength is really powerful. You can only become stronger by eating devil fruit. It will be like that for a lifetime." Sengoku and Garp are not good at this topic. Shrugging, Garp took out a donut from Kabuto. "Don't be angry. Come on, eat a donut." Chapter 42 The Mystery of Failure. Ding! Congratulations to Dashu L for his achievement, 10 fans. Seeing Minnie appearing in less than 3 seconds, he announced GG again, and Simon was stunned. "I'm going. Do you want to kneel so quickly? What did you say I did to save you?" Loya kicked Minnie away from the ground, rubbed his fists and approached Simon. "So, do you choose to faint or be fainted?" "Passed out. You think I'm stupid. But, I wouldn't take a dog leash so easily." Simon's eyes narrowed and he quickly took out something from Kabuto. "Do you still want to resist?" Loya took a step forward with a sneer, and the big fist of the sandbag went straight to Simon's big face. Suddenly, Simon raised the thing in his hand and blocked it in front of his fist. Huh! The strong fist wind blew past, and the white cloth floated back and stuck to Simon's face. "That's a white flag." Loya, who stopped attacking, opened his mouth wide and stared at Simon, who was holding his head and squatting in defense. I have never seen such a shameless guy. Hey, Marshal Sengoku, Lieutenant General Garp, and Chief Instructor Zeph are all watching from above. Don't you have to show your face? No, just don't hit me. Simon said simply and neatly, without raising his head. Sengoku and Garp, who were watching this scene from a distance, communicated with each other with strange eyes, and then looked at Zephyr together. Zephyr Tip Kiba roared, "What's up with me? That's how the Weston family is. What can I do? You guys, get out of the way." Suddenly, a deep voice sounded. Everyone looked at the sound, and Tonymir, who was in the posture of drawing a knife, slowly raised his head, and his pale blue pupils became extremely chimpanzee Yuhi at this moment, locked on Loya. As he raised his head, a terrifying murderous aura suddenly appeared in the arena. After saying these words, that murderous aura was immediately condensed several times. Simon, who was holding his head and squatting in defense, looked back, rolled and ran away cleanly, and at the same time called the survivor, who was stunned to run together. "Don't be stunned, Tony's move is ignoring the enemy and me, you think will it become two pieces? Run if you can run, and lie on the ground if you can't run. Also, push down those fellows, don't keep their necks at the same level as Loya's." Quote. In the stance, Sengoku narrowed his eyes. "This is Shira Kendo, right? I didn't expect it to still be passed down in the world. Didn't it mean that the last generation of descendants died when they challenged Mihawk?" Sengoku was young, he played against the descendants of Shira Kendo, and he suffered a lot, so he was very impressed with this genre. Zephyr nodded, and then explained to the blank-faced Garp. Asura swordsmanship, different from the profound meaning of ordinary swordsman's ultimate slash, is a swordsmanship specially designed for killing people. Before this, it has always been a dark world. The first killer's trump card. Then he looked at Sengoku. Although the killer codenamed Shira did die, but before he died, he left Kendo in the sea, and Tony was one of the descendants. This is why his hometown was attacked by pirates. For this power, the dark world has offered a bounty as high as 1 billion Baileys. Quote. It's just that after so many years, we have only found Tony, and we haven't even got any news about the other descendants, so Tony may be the only descendant of Shira Kendo in the world. But unfortunately, Tony himself does not. It's not suitable for this swordsmanship, the strength is really limited. Zephyr's explanation, the two people who looked at each other on the field could not know. Can't escape. This is the conclusion of eye contact, Loya came to. Op-world has always been a kind of magical power. Swordsmen can develop air-breaking slashes, attach domineering to invisible things like slashing, and even lock the target with sword energy as they are now. A feeling of being unable to escape. Loya didn't understand what the principle was, but he knew that Tony's next attack would bring him fatal damage. This is something that the silverback great ape has not done. The alarm bell rang in his mind, and the instinct brought by the dragon's body frantically urged him to avoid. Ha! It's getting more and more interesting. Obviously it's just a bunch of tricks. Why does it have such power? Minnie is too, so is Aldo. This Tony is too, Loya complained in his heart. At this moment, Tony, who felt that Loya was in awe, moved. Shira Upanishad, Thousand Corpse Buddha. Silently, the sword in Tony's hand swiped lightly in the air, and returned to the sheath very quickly, as if it had never been pulled out. A Yuhi line of the orangutan Yuhi appeared in the air, then disappeared instantly. Dangerous. The alarm bell exploded in Loya's mind, goosebumps all over his body, and cold sweat soaked his clothes unconsciously. But he found that his legs seemed to be filled with lead, and he refused to obey. In the next instant, the Yuhi line appeared in front of Loya, less than 10 centimeters from his neck, and the piercing killing intent made his skin tighten. PFF'd. Originally this is the content of the previous chapter, but this out-of-context method will be beaten. Sengoku. Carp. Simon. Tony. Onlookers. Wait, why are you so dumbfounded? Loya gasped for breath and touched his neck, only to find that there was only a scratch on the smooth ice armor. Not to mention fatal injuries, even the ice armor did not penetrate. Huh, there's nothing at all. Awakened by everyone's roar, Tony was also taken aback for a moment, but he recovered immediately and apologized to everyone, with embarrassment written on his face. "I'm sorry, I forgot, I still can't cut the steel." Quote. Sengoku looked at Zephyr helplessly and asked, "Zephyr, what the hell is going on?" Tony's imposing manner just now made him feel shocked, and he still thought in his heart that the means of the #1 killer in the dark world was indeed extraordinary. The results of it. Not to mention killing Loya, he didn't even get a wound at all. Zephyr covered his face helplessly at the moment, and his voice seemed a little dull through the back of his hand. The secret of Shira is different from ordinary slashing. It does not cause penetrating damage after hitting the target, but stays inside for strangulation, with the softness of the human body. Sex, how to resist the strangulation of sword energy. This is also the reason why it is called killing swordsmanship. Quote. But because of this, it can't directly destroy the target's defense, it needs to be broken by the swordsman's own hard power. Loya, this bastard, has been strengthening his own defense. I don't know how hard the ice armor on his neck is, but it is definitely not something that Tony can cut through now. If Loya heard Zephyr's words, he would definitely say, "That's really." Yao Ming's face, "Love it." Kuzan taught him not to spread his defenses out on the first day, but to focus on the key positions. He has always done this. After several upgrades, the frost armor will not appear bloated, affecting activities, and its defense power has also been greatly increased. Especially the vital points around him. Even Aldo, who can use armament hockey, is very difficult to smash. Not to mention Tony with half a bucket of water. But even so, Tony's attack was enough to make Loya startled. The profound meaning that takes 1 minute to accumulate power is indeed extraordinary, and Shira Kendo is worthy of being the first killer's trick, but unfortunately, he met Loya, who opened the shield first in the fight. What? That's what it is. Carp pinched his nose. That is, if the ice cube didn't exist on the boy's neck, he would have been opened by now, right? That's right. Zephyr wasn't interested in raising a bar with Garp, looked at Sengoku, and decided not to tell him about Loya's situation. It's not that you don't trust Garp, it's just that the other party is too out of character. After a pause, Zephyr said, "However, those with animal abilities have a very strong recovery ability, not to mention the giant dragon fruit that is one of the best among the phantom beasts." Once Loya and Kuzan fought, his lungs were stabbed. Where, before Kuzan could find a doctor, the bleeding stopped on the spot. After a day of training, you can even do low-intensity training. So even if Tony really opened a mouth in his neck and leaned on his body as tough as a giant dragon, Loya wouldn't be able to die. He can heal the injury in a month or 2 at most. Is there such a thing? Garp was startled and looked at Loya, who was in the audience. Is it really so outrageous for you demons? Yes, it's just so unscientific. Zephyr smiled bitterly. Loya's vitality is one of the strongest among the people he's ever seen. If you want to kill Loya with one move, there's really nothing better than destroying the key points directly. Method. What Zephyr didn't know was that Loya's powerful resilience was actually the blessing of the system. It's just that the principle is not clear to Loya. Thinking about the original book, the Dragon Slayer wizard in it doesn't have the strange power and resilience that Loya has now. Magic value is not something that can be digitized, and magic also takes a long time to learn to master, and there is no classification of energy stages. The only plausible explanation for these differences is probably the system itself. After the excitement of passing through that meeting was over, Luoya would also study and fiddle with this system in his spare time, and he had already been alert to the various unreasonable situations that appeared in himself. He had a hunch that, as a traveler, sometimes the biggest enemy might be Goldfinger. Chapter 43 Elite Camp, the third update. Ask for collection and recommendation. Under the stand, Tony felt blackness in front of his eyes, his footsteps were vain, and he hurriedly used his sword to stab the ground to support himself from falling. In a complete kendo genre, the secret moves are often the strongest skills, which require extremely high swordsmanship and tough physique as a Jinchuriki column. Tony's own character is not in line with the dogma of Shirakendo, and it is even more difficult to display the profound meaning. As a result, Tony wrongly estimated the hardness of the Roha ice armor, not to mention leaving some souvenirs. It didn't break the defense at all. There is no master in the Thousand Corpse Buddha, so Tony reluctantly used it despite the danger of sudden death, but he couldn't even leave a memory for Loya. He raised his head and looked at Loya with a wry smile, with a faint breath. You are really strong. In the future, please give me more advice. No, I refuse, Loya said, rushing up and knocking him unconscious. Then he put his arms around Tony, who was lying down on the front, and said lightly, a dangerous guy like you should fight against Aldo more in the future. He is rough and thick and is not afraid of fighting. The giant zergling Aludo, who was struggling with the strength to suckle, heard this and scolded, Loya, you bastard. You kind of let me go. I want to fight you for 300 rounds. Ha, let's talk about it when you can break free. The guy the first kill every time is not qualified to say this. With a French disdain on his face, Loya turned to look at the recruits who couldn't move, then. Who else wants to be beaten? The recruits glanced at their companions helplessly, threw away their weapons and chose to surrender. At this time, no one knows what to say. Roha has always been very strong, and everyone knows this. Especially in the actual combat assessment, killing the silverback great ape head-on will make Roha's prestige reach the peak in the recruit camp. They never expected to actually beat Loya. But in any case, they never thought that even if the whole battalion went together, they would not be able to leave a single scar on Loya. That's it, he was still merciful at Loya's hands, and he didn't use a large-scale attack. The dozens of ice wolves alone will smash hundreds of people into pieces, and once they fight Roha head-on. Didn't you see that all three of the elite camp were brought down by one face-to-face? The mouths of the recruits were dry, and the gap in strength was too great. Seeing this, Zephyr stood up from the seat. Now I announce that this test, Christopher Loya, wins. Completely, it's not even a warm-up. On the way to the cafeteria, Loya sighed. Whether it is Aludo or Brother Jerome, the pressure that can bring him now is too small. They came from the elite camp known as the Monster Gathering Place. Loya couldn't help but feel a little heartbroken. Kuzan left the mission and didn't come back for a few months. There are no opponents in the elite camp. Where should he go to find opponents to upgrade during this time? Is it okay to go back to the boot camp to provoke the instructor? Or to see if Lieutenant General Mole continues to read the little yellow book? In that way, the energy value must increase very quickly, which is a bit suspicious of death. Zephyr will definitely hang him up and beat him, because Loya who passed the test is already his disciple. Loya is ashamed, and his face is disgraceful. Thinking of this, Loya opened the system panel. Name, Christopher Loya. Energy stage, second order 6 layer. Energy value, 341 thousandths. Mana, 9,009 thousandths. Mana recovery speed, 850 per minute. With the improvement of the energy stage, Loya gained less and less energy after practicing and fighting. Today's battle only increased 50 energy points, of which the full 20 points were created by Brother Jerome and Uru. Provide more. Most of the defeated recruits did not even contribute at all. Is it only 340? When will it be possible to reach the third rank after this? Putting away the panel, Loya sighed. With the integration of modeling magic, in addition to upgrading the system, Loya could not find a better way to improve his strength in a short period of time. The ice wolf representing movement, and the armor of ice representing quietness. Through today's battle, Loya can also use it proficiently in actual combat, and can do it well, and it is unlikely that he will figure it out by himself. In terms of dragon-slaying magic, although transformation moves such as Awakening and Pseudo-Dragon Transformation have been developed, it has not had much impact on dragon-slaying magic as a whole. It's like a swordsman's physique has become stronger, and his slashes are naturally more swift and fierce, but it does not mean that his kendo level has improved. It is difficult for a clever woman to cook without rice. She was not raised by the dragon mother, and Luoya was still blinded by the dragon-killing magic. But all in all, today's battle is still rewarding. Although it only has 40 energy points, no matter how small the mosquito is, it is not meat, and it makes Loya familiar with the power obtained after a breakthrough in modeling magic. After lunch, Loya joined Tony and the others to the square in front of the huge fortress of the Navy headquarters. This location is the site of the war on the top, a huge square large enough to accommodate a battle of 100,000 people. Standing in front of the main body of Hiroshi's fortress, with a towering fortress in front, an endless straight line behind, and a line of sea and sky in the distance, a sense of insignificance arises spontaneously. Well, except Loya. Can't expect a guy who's nibbling on roast suckling pigs to be so serious right now. After Loya took the last bite, Zephyr appeared in front of several people, just right. Looking at Loya who was still licking his fingers, Zephyr's eyes twitched vaguely. However, he quickly adjusted his form and said solemnly, "Follow me." Although both are recruit training institutions, the locations of the recruit battalion and the elite battalion are far apart. One is on the edge of Marineford, close to the sea, while the other is inside the fortress, at the core. This is also one of the reasons why Loya expressed contempt for Ludo and others in the morning. It's just that it's only nominally hanging in the boot camp, let's not talk about it. Zephyr is the chief instructor, and he has a big fist. Whatever he says is what he says. But even the training locations are so different, how dare you say that you are from a boot camp? In addition, the treatment between the two also belongs to two worlds. Because of the small number of people, Zephyr can provide targeted guidance to each person one-on-one face-to-face, and the effect is far from the one-to-many guidance of major generals and officers. This fortress Loya is the first time to come in. The recruits have a range of activities for the recruits. The Navy of the One Piece world is no longer in tune, and a group of recruits will not be allowed to scramble at will. Along the way, Loya looked around curiously. Whether it was the decoration or the layout, there was a chilling smell in the fortress. The potted plants placed in the corridor are full of greenery, and the sun shines on the green leaves through the window, bringing the only trace of warmth. Zephyr led Loya and his party through the long corridor and entered the passage on the right. The two soldiers at the door saw Zephyr and respectfully raised their hands and straightened their waists in salute. "Chief Instructor Zephyr." Zephyr nodded as a greeting. After passing through the passage, the group came to a wide courtyard. In the center of the courtyard covered with bluestone, several Navy soldiers dressed as recruits are training. Among them is Loya's acquaintance, Erudo. He was arrogantly laughing and fighting people, or rather, being beaten. Let the other party punch and kick on his body without shaking his face. In addition to the landmark figure of Erudo, no mistake, the most notable people in the courtyard are the three swordsmen. Brother Jerome, who had a one-sided relationship, held Zanyu and Zumi Izumi, alternately besieging the skinny swordsman in the siege circle. Brother Jerome's swordsmanship, Roha, is very strong. To be honest, he doesn't have a good way to deal with that kind of attack right now, so he can only use his strength to trick it. But facing such an opponent, the thin swordsman in the field did not move a single step, closed his eyes, raised his wooden sword and accurately blocked every slash. It's so strong. Tony's eyes were full of light, and he tightly held the long sword around his waist. Is that practicing observation hockey? Simon is a military generation after all, and his knowledge and experience are unmatched by others, so he came to a conclusion just by looking at it. Zephyr nodded approvingly and introduced, "That is the current chief of the elite battalion, Bibi Hanza. A pure swordsman." Loya looked at him in surprise. Pure swordsman. This statement is very subtle. At this moment, the members of the elite camp noticed that several people were approaching, and looked over in unison. After being stunned for a while, he saluted Zephyr neatly. "Teacher Zephyr." In the crowd, Erudo put his eyes on Loya, smiled and said to the people beside him, he's finally here, it's interesting now. Oh yes, that dwarf is Loya. Loya's hearing is so sharp, not to mention that Aludo didn't cover up at all, this sentence was clearly heard. Short, short. Suddenly, a strong chill shot out from Loya's body. Zephyr still didn't understand what was going on. He only felt a dark shadow flashing by his side. The next second, the huge Aldo disappeared in front of his eyes. Boom! The bluestone floor exploded directly, and countless rubble sputtered like bullets. Facing this chaos, the members of the elite battalion were startled at first, and then they showed their magical powers and easily blocked the stones. To answer the questions of the book friends, it is impossible to break up with the system. After all, this is what he depends on to survive. I can't help such an obvious poison point. It's just that because the situation is abnormal, it is too different from the legendary Dragon Slayer, and Loya must figure out the reason. Is anyone curious? Sorry for not being clear in my previous post. I read a lot of system articles, some of which only briefly explained the root cause of the system before finishing the book, and then disappeared. But I am different. The root cause of the Dragon Slayer system is related to the problem of Loya dragonization that you expect, so I have to fill this pit. So I'll lay a foreshadowing here first, so that it won't be so abrupt when Loya studies the system in the future. Think about it, is this system different from others? There is no mind control. It must be opened by meditating on the 3 words of the golden finger. The upgrade also requires manual clicks, and self-developed skills can also be added. So no spoilers. Chapter 44 inches repeat, Aludo. Thank you book friend Goptri for the 100 tip. The name Loya sounds familiar. Have you forgotten, he is the guy who was accepted as a disciple by General Aokiji and killed the silverback great ape in the elite assessment. Oh, he's that monster rookie. The members of the elite camp sighed and looked at the pothole. Indeed, so short. Perhaps before the crossing, with the height of Loya, S-175, no one could feel the conscience and say, shorty. But in the world of One Piece, this height is very embarrassing, not to mention the white-bearded Moria Bartholomew bears, even the female Emperor Hancock is close to 2 meters. Aludo said that Loya was a dwarf and was not making fun of him, as his brain might not be able to perform such a difficult operation. It's just a simple statement of a fact, but this fact hurts people. And hurts myself. Aludo was lying in the innermost of the pothole, breathing cold air in pain. Loya stomped on Aldo with his feet to prevent him from moving. He held a pair of ice tweezers in his hand and plucked Aldo's lush chest hair one by one. Dwarf, isn't it? You're not too timid. Tough mouth ah. Aludo struggled hard, but his strength was not as strong as that of Loya, and Yuhi's face rose aggrieved. The people around didn't know how to describe this scene, they turned their heads and looked at Zephyr. Zephyr squeezed Kiba Hanako and waved weakly, I didn't see anything. He turned around and ignored Arudo's suppressed moans, and introduced Tony to them. From today, you can call me Teacher Zephyr. This is where you will stay in the future. Of course, you can also move here to live. Quote. From the moment you step here, I hope that you will stop thinking of yourself as an ordinary recruit, but a Navy, a real soldier. Our elite camp, in addition to the usual training, will also accept real combat missions. That is different from your combat training and actual combat assessment. No one will protect you, there is no retreat, and the battle between the pirates and the life is blocked. Quote. Do you understand? Zephyr unknowingly mobilized his momentum, and with the might taste in his words, those who are not firm in heart may be scared to shit. Tony and the others were indeed nervous, but not afraid. From the day they joined the Navy, they knew that they had the title of the worst recruit in this class. Who would be willing to bear such a humiliating title? Joining elite camp today is the best answer to their efforts. Looking at each other, the 3 straightened their backs and shouted loudly, understood. That roar completely discarded the humiliation and unwillingness of the past 2 years. From today, they are an elite camp. Seeing this scene, Zephyr smiled with satisfaction. Very good. Remember what you said today. Then he slowed down and began to introduce the difference between the elite battalion and the recruit battalion. When it came to the question of the graduation assessment, Zephyr made a move, and instantly appeared beside Loya and Aldo. He caught one and threw it out of the pothole, and jumped on it and beat him. It's endless. I'm going to talk about the graduation assessment now, so listen to me. Especially you, Aldo. Yes. The two with blue noses and swollen faces remained seated and nodded respectfully. The elite battalion's graduation assessment setting is very different from that of the recruit battalion. The latter only needs to be tested at the venue, and those who pass the various abilities can declare graduation, and then distribute according to the opinions of the boss. For members of the elite camp, it is much more troublesome for them to graduate. Their graduation assessment is divided into 3 items, and they cannot graduate if any one fails. The first step is the physical fitness test, which is mainly about basic qualities such as speed, strength, and endurance. The second step is the actual combat test. One is randomly selected from the reward order hanging on the Navy headquarters and used as the test target. It can be arrested or killed. Although most of the powerhouses with terrifying bounties have been excluded, the difficulty of the remaining bounties still fluctuates. The third step, and the most important step, is the assessment stage that belongs to the elite battalion, called the deathmatch in prison. As the name suggests, elites applying for the assessment need to fight to the death in a specially made arena. Their opponents may be captured pirates, various powerful beasts, admirals and so on. There are 10 death battles in total, and only 4 are counted as passing. Only after completing the above 3 steps can you officially graduate. The only thing that pleases the members of the elite camp is that these 3 stages are only sequential and do not care about coherence, and can be completed within 3 years. Although it is completely free to apply for the graduation assessment. But, I don't want to have a situation where I am not strong enough and lose a lot of battles, understand? Having said that, Zephyr looks like he can eat people, so Loya is fortunate that what he wants to eat is not himself. Aldo nodded slyly and replied, understood. The situation is clear at a glance. Aludo is the guy who is insufficient in strength and has been defeated and fought repeatedly in Zephyr's mouth. However, how is this possible? For the elite camp, the person Loya is most familiar with is Aldo. The name of the Iron Nugget Master is not blown out. Is his strength not enough to graduate? In addition to the Iron Block, which is one of the 6 Grandmaster styles, the artillery boxing method passed down by Aldo is not weak. As if he knew what Loya was thinking, Zephyr glanced at him lightly and said, Aldo has good strength, and it stands to reason that he can graduate. However, his speed evaluation is only D, so will he be a target after graduation? Loya was stunned for a moment, as if that was indeed the case. Is Arudo slow? No, it's too fast compared to the average recruit. But he's a member of the elite battalion, which is a tortoise in comparison. After Loya's strength has greatly increased, he relies on several times the speed to kill Aldo in seconds. Before he can't react, he bundles up and fights. He looked at Aldo sympathetically, who drooped his head, with an expression like I was already a salted fish. Loya raised his hand and asked, well, Mr. Zephyr, I remember that Arudo has been in the elite camp for more than 2 years. If he still fails the assessment after the 3-year period expires, what will happen? Aldo's expression became even worse, and Loya's behavior was tantamount to pouring salt on the wound. What will happen? Humph. Zephyr replied with a sneer. According to the regulations, members of the elite battalion who fail to pass the assessment in 3 years can still graduate, but they will start from the lowest level of sundry soldiers to show that punishment. But, Zephyr suddenly raised his voice. This old man has been the chief instructor for so many years, and there has never been a situation where he failed the assessment. If that happens, hum. Aludo, who was as strong as a brown bear, trembled like a little chicken, and said loudly, I will definitely pass the test. Please rest assured, Teacher Zephyr. The meaning expressed by Zephyr's last sneer is self-evident. If Aldo really did that, maybe Zephyr would kill Aldo first, lest he smear the elite camp. Chapter 45 Beat from a Veteran. Thank you very much. This chapter is a bit late. After having dinner with the client in the afternoon, I started coding when I got home. In addition to the rigid requirements of strength, the rules of the elite battalion are actually quite loose, and they are far better than the recruit battalion. The first point is that there is no need to get up early every day for training, and it is very leisurely. If you want to practice, practice. If you don't want to go out to play, Zephyr doesn't care. It's just that every once in a while, Zephyr will gather all the members to test and evaluate the cultivation results of the elite camp members during this period, and the members can freely arrange the rest of the time. In addition, everyone in the elite camp is responsible for the food and clothing, and they only need to concentrate on their practice. However, the only problem is that the meals prepared by the chefs here are all medicated meals that are nutritionally balanced and full of energy. The taste is good. Just look at Arudo and go to the boot camp to eat rice. Okay, I'll introduce the elite camp here first. After disbanding, you can go to familiarize yourself with the environment here. Different rooms have different exercise props. In addition, if you want to move here, you can just move in after dinner. Quote. After speaking, Zephyr shouted to the old members who were exercising, "Today's teaching and research will start in half an hour. It's still the old rule. You decide the order yourself. Do you understand?" The veteran smiled playfully and said loudly, "Understood." Zephyr hummed, glanced calmly at Tony and the others, turned and left the yard. Bing Ching Yu Jia. Ah. Bing Shui's smart lawyer was stunned for a while, and then suddenly realized. He nudged Aludo next to him with his elbow, and asked with the latter's, "Don't be troublesome," expression, "Hey. Guess, where do those guys behind me rank? Keep it in the middle." Not possible. When it came to this topic, the depressed Aludo immediately came to his spirit. I think it's a little off. That guy named Tony Mill is good, but we have 5 or 6 good swordsmen here, and he doesn't have any advantage. Logically speaking, it should go straight to the bottom like I used to. Is it really okay for you to expose yourself like this? Loya rolled the eyes of the dead fish and complained, then ignored him. He turned his head and looked, except that Simon had heard a little about the situation of the elite camp. Tony and Minnie were completely confused. Hey, new here. Sure enough, almost before Zephyr stepped out of the courtyard, before his hind feet landed, a voice suddenly came. Loya and Aludo both smiled wickedly and looked at the voice. The speaker is an elite battalion veteran, and the standard version of the recruit's jacket is stunned by him wearing a tight jacket, which is really a talent. On the head is the symbol of the beastly clan, the nose of the plane. The ruffian looks like a gangster instead of a navy, with a condescending look. Aludo explained to Loya in a low voice, his name is Mind Nufik. I heard that he used to be the leader of a small gang in the East China Sea. His strength is in the middle class in the elite camp, but his temper is the greatest. Loya snorted, ready to watch the show. The hostility in the other party's eyes was obvious. Tony, as the number 1 in the assessment, took a step forward. May I ask you what advice you have? Yo, still a man of culture. Ming said with an exaggerated expression, then raised his head and squinted at Tony. You are new here. As for me, as your senior, I think I need to teach you some rules that Mr. Zephyr won't teach. Just like, honestly go last, understand? Listening to the other party's contemptuous tone, the 3 people's expressions immediately softened. Laurent Mini is a hot temper, ready to go up as a kick, but was dragged by Simon. Simon said something in her ear. Minnie stood still angrily. This is to do something. Speaking of which, how could they not understand what happened? Tonio froze and put his hand on the hilt of the sword. Please forgive me for rejecting what your excellency said. Ha, still a hard bone. The other party is a little guy who just came out of the boot camp, and has never accepted Zephyr's guidance. In Mingdi's view, as long as you threaten the other party with 2 sentences, you can hand over the privileges of the newcomer, and honestly queue up at the back. Yes, it's a newcomer privilege. The elite camp expressly stipulates that new members have priority to enjoy the privilege of mentoring in the first week. Even so, if they voluntarily give up, no one can say anything. You must know that there are dozens of people in the elite camp, and it is very likely that Zephyr will not be able to get his turn at the bottom of the line, so Zephyr will stop work and go home. Therefore, in the first week of recruits joining, the veterans will beat the new recruits in this way, which is acquiesced by Zephyr. It's not that Zephyr doesn't pay attention to newcomers, but this model can effectively improve the competitiveness of elite camps. There is competition, there will be progress. Only those recruits who have experienced humiliation, have their thorns pulled out, and are shameless and brave can gain a firm foothold in the elite camp. There is no need to enjoy peace in the elite camp. There will never be an elite camp like the Kobo Tower. They will be the backbone of the Navy in the future and will fight against the pirates on the front line. It stands to reason that this should be the case, but I didn't expect that Mingdi's words were decisively rejected by the other party. Ming felt that he couldn't hold his face anymore, and his tone became cold. It looks like your kid is not going to be at the bottom of the line. The expression on Tony's face did not waver at all. His eyes were locked on Ming. The left hand holding the sword hilt had been released and moved back. The right hand was holding the sword hilt vacantly, and he was standing under his feet. I heard that there are countless elites in the elite camp, and I have longed for it. If you use your power to bully others and rob you, please forgive me that it is difficult for me to obey. Speak human words. Loya watched anxiously from the side, and threw the ice spear out. Call out. The ice spear was swift and fierce, and flew directly between Ming and Tony. The sound of the wind was shrill and harsh, and then with a thud, Keegan plunged into the soil. Gulong. The two of them looked at each other, and they could clearly see each other's drooling movements. Tony adjusted his mentality and said solemnly, "Don't you just want to give us a slap in the face? If you want priority, that's okay. Let's beat Lao Su." Ming said, "Don't you be so afraid. The language is completely different, hey." The rest of the elite battalion members cast a surprised look at Loya. This ability, as expected, it's as rumored. Through the ice spear, the veterans silently raised the Loya threat by several levels. After all, a month ago, it was really shocking to join Loya to defeat Aldo head-on. In the next month, the news came one after another, which was enough to prove Loya's strength. Even in the elite camp where monsters are clustered, Loya is the real monster. And Shin, although I'm a newcomer, I'm not in the mood to attack you. Your opponent is that guy. Luoya clapped his hands, shook off the ice chips on his hands, and explained to Mingda. Ming subconsciously wanted to fight back with foul language, but when he recalled the opponent's record, he found that his legs were shaking, and he didn't dare to shoot at all. So he pointed the gun at Tony. "I'm no match for that monster, but what about you?" First lost face, and then was mocked by Loya. Ming is like a volcano that is about to erupt, and endless anger floods his heart. Bang! A wolf kiba stick more than 2 meters long was thrown beside him. Ming turned his head and said to the beckoning veteran, "Thank you, Keelung." Then he grabbed the wolf kiba stick and put it on his shoulders. He looked at Tony, who was waiting for him with contempt. "Come on, let me see what kind of skills you have." Chapter 46 Tony's No Misfortune. Avi. Then, offended, Tony is also unequivocal. He knows how much he has. Even if he was the owner of the gym before, it doesn't mean that he can despise an elite battalion recruit. With a kick of footsteps, Tony quickly approached Ming, who was standing tailily. Mingda's defenseless action aroused Tony's anger. He clenched the hilt of the sword, and said solemnly, "How dare you be so careless?" Laugh. An arc flashed, and Tony's figure disappeared in place in an instant, and only the moonlike trajectory could be seen across Mingdi's chest. The next second, Tony reappeared in front of Ming, maintaining a forward stance, the blade in his hand slowly retracting into the scabbard. Clang! One blade flow arc light. This speed. Loya looked at Tony with a bit of surprise. The scene just now made him feel like Tony was using a shave, but then shook his head. No, it's not the speed. Unique acceleration tricks and pace moves. It's nice, but I'm careless. Loya sighed. You said you have nothing to do with paws. Feeling the touch from the blade, Tony thought his attack had worked. He stood up, turned his back to Ming, and before he opened his mouth to make a syllable, the sound of breaking the air suddenly sounded, and the wolf Kiba came with a whistling surprise. What? Boom. The attack came so suddenly. With one blow, Tony only had time to put the scabbard on his shoulders, and before he had time to adjust his body, he was hit by a blow and flew out. What happened? Minnie and Simon looked horrified. Didn't Tony just hit each other? Why did the counterattack come so quickly? PFF'd. Tony spat out a mouthful of bruised blood, resting his hands in the mud, his clean face covered with mud. He felt as if he had been hit by the Shigu Niu head-on. The irresistible force hit his shoulders, instantly shattering his shoulder blades. If it wasn't for his scabbard blocking it, he would have been seriously injured and dying. At the same time, I was shocked. Can any guy in the elite camp have such strength? Ming dragged the wolf Kiba back and put it on his shoulders again. I know, you are the first in this recruit battalion, and are called monsters by countless recruits. But don't forget, here elite camp. Each of us was once a monster. How can a chick like you, who has not experienced guidance and has not really fought, be my opponent? Ming smiled disdainfully, only to see that he wiped it with his hand, and a white mark on his chest was directly touched. That was the place where Tony had cut him just now. Even if he was as strong as Tony, he only had a white mark in one move, and he couldn't even cut his skin. When Tony started, Loya keenly discovered something was wrong. In the world of One Piece, the swordsman is one of the best in terms of destructive power, although it is a bad street. The two sides are fighting head-on, even if they have stronger strength than the other side, they must be careful of the sharp attack on the opposite side. Ming did not defend at all just now. Why? In addition to relying on something, Loya couldn't think of any other answer. It is so careless to underestimate the enemy. With the same gangster style as the outside, it is impossible for Ming to enter the elite camp by voting. The fact was just as he expected. Just as Tony chopped up just now, Roha, who had powerful dynamic vision, saw it. Tony's blade stopped less than 2 millimeters in front of Ming. It was as if there was an invisible layer of armor wrapped around him, and what Tony cut was just that layer of armor. Aludo explained in a timely manner by the side. Ming uses a rare chi energy, which can form a layer of chi film on the body surface to protect itself, and can also be used in attacks to strengthen its power. Hearing Aldo's explanation, Loya understood. There are 3 strongest abilities in One Piece world. One is Devil Fruit, the other is swordsmanship, and the third is domineering. But that doesn't mean the world doesn't have other abilities. And not only are there, some abilities are not bad, not weaker than the above 3. This is the case with the 8 Chongquan of the 8 Treasures Navy and the Murloc Karate of the Murlocs. Mingdi's Qigong belongs to the ability outside these main themes. It has to be said that it can resist the slashing of the lower blade. Even Roha can't help but be moved by this effect. However, if you don't pose a pause, you can avoid it. Tisk tisk. Loya didn't have much sympathy in his eyes. Tony deserved the injury this time, and he was negligent when he thought he was hit. If Ming is a pirate, this stick can completely follow his head, and after his death, he will be listed on the elite camp mental retardation rankings, commonly known as negative teaching materials. Wow! Spitting out a mouthful of blood again, Tony stood up staggeringly. The scabbard was smashed by the attack just now, but his sword was unscathed. This sword is not a famous sword, it is just a weapon made by an ordinary blacksmith shop, but after being with Tony for nearly 20 years, it already has a characteristic that is different from other ordinary soldiers. Putting the sword in front of him, the pale Tony panted, stood firm, his expression was the same as before, and a strong fighting intent gathered in his eyes. I admit that you are strong, but you said, ... I'm a chick who hasn't experienced a real fight, are you sure? Yo, you can actually stand up. Ming raised his eyebrows cynically, and then his face immediately turned gloomy. I admire your will, really. But, you are so embarrassing for me. At the end of the sentence, Ming became very crazy. Almost as soon as the words fell, he appeared behind Tony, and the raised wolf kiba was aimed at Tony and fell fiercely. Ding! The harsh symphony of gold and iron sounded, and Tony's eyes rolled, looking at the figure standing beside him. It was a very thin man. There was not a lot of flesh on his body, his eyes were dark and blue, and his eyes were deeply sunken, like a sick tuber. No, maybe it's a sick person. Blocking Mingdi's attack, he coughed up a few times and even coughed up blood. But with such a weak and uncontrollable appearance, he used a slender longsword to block Mingdi's powerful wolf kiba, who had blue veins on his face and was obviously still working on it. It's a pity that no matter how hard he tried, the long sword never moved. Seeing this, Ming sneered, "What's wrong? Our Lord Hansa, you actually help this newcomer. This is not the you I know." Bibi Hansa coughed again and said lightly, "Well, they are all swordsmen, so naturally I can't bear to see him being abolished by you. Besides, aren't you afraid that Teacher Zepha will punish you in the future?" Zepha's prestige is still very useful in the elite camp. Seeing that Hansa had brought out this great god, Ming cut off his weapon and retracted his weapon. Then how dare I? I'll give you a face this time and let this kid go. Later, there is a chance to clean him up. Cough, cough. Then, thank you very much. Arudo is about to do his duty again. Narration. But he saw Loya waved his hand to stop him from continuing. I know who he is, Bibi Hansa, the current chief of the elite camp. It is said that he officially entered the realm of swordsmen a few months ago. Yes, that's right. Aldo scratched his head and asked, what is the current Loya? He has always been the chief of the elite battalion. Talking to smart people is easy, talking to stupid people is hard work. Loya sighed and said, idiot, do you think he can still be the chief when I'm here? Aldo blinked blankly, stunned for 2 seconds, slammed the palm of his hand, and said suddenly, oh. Yes, you are so strong, you will definitely challenge Hansa. But, Loya, can you really beat Hansa? He can kill several big pirates with a bounty of over 100 million. In a blink of an eye, Arudo was caught in a tangle again. Loya, as far as the end of the sea is, as far as you go. Chapter 47 Elite Camp Chief. Thank you book friend Alexander Liangshi for the 100 tip. Yes, you are here again, I like telling the truth the most. Open black lens bracket funny close black lens bracket. Although he said it lightly, Loya still maintained due vigilance towards this elite battalion chief named Hansa. Just now he blocked Mingdi's attack, and the speed of the explosion made Loya have the illusion of facing Kuzan. Of course, this is also related to Kuzan never showing his true strength, but this alone is enough to see Hansa's accomplishments in shaving. And according to Arudo's explanation, when Ming was attacking just now, the wolf kiba stick in his hand should be wrapped in an invisible air film, which is stronger than when he hit Tony before. This one called Hansa, who can only hold a sword with one hand, can be firmly blocked, and his strength is definitely not weak. With fast speed and strong strength, as the chief of the elite battalion, the use of domineering will not be too bad. It is still a profession with strong offensive power like a swordsman. These known information are enough to make Loya pay attention to it. When Ming saw Hansa's shot, he knew that he was almost done playing. After he finished speaking, he let go of the strength in his hand and removed the wolf kiba's stick from the sword. Taking 2 steps back, he suddenly turned around and looked up at Tony with blood on the corner of his mouth. Now, do you know what to do? Well, but even if you still don't want to, with your current injury, Teacher Zepha won't let you stay here, go to the infirmary and lie down. Ha 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 ha. Damn. Laurent Mini clenched the kiba pass, staring at Ming with fire-breathing eyes. But she is very clear about the difference between recklessness and bravery. Now, let alone avenge Tony, I am afraid she will go to the infirmary. He just stared at each other unwillingly, his beautiful eyes were covered with anger. Simon glanced at Minnie, sighed helplessly, and comforted. Forget it, we are too weak compared to them now. Believe in yourself. There will be a long time in the future, we can always find it back. Field. After that, he came to Tony and supported the latter with his shoulders. Come on Minnie, I know where the infirmary is. As the N generation of the army, growing up in Marineford, Simon is very aware of the layout of the fortress. Yo, Minged, it's over so soon. This class of recruits is too bad. The speaker was the guy who threw the wolf Kiba stick to Minged before. He had been watching the fun from a while ago, but now he walked up to Minged with a weird tone. Hearing Keelung's words, Minged was taken aback. Shut up Keelung. Minged roared in a low voice. The ferocious facial features showed the master's unwillingness. Don't you feel it? That guy over there is staring at us. Minged didn't dare to look back. Keelung's move was considered a good one. This year's recruits, doesn't this term include the monster over there? The ice spear just passed through the two of them like lightning, and Minged had no doubt that even if he had an iron block like Aldo, he would be penetrated by a spear with his qigong. At that moment, Minged remembered the scene of his first actual combat mission. The feeling of being close to death made his adrenaline soar, and the sudden acceleration of his heartbeat made him almost out of breath. Well, what's so amazing, isn't it that you killed the silverback great ape? No matter how strong you are, you're just a brainless beast. If you want to kill, just use your brains. You really go back the longer you live. Quote. Keelung said indifferently, and at the same time turned his head with contempt, just in line with Loya. Besides, do you think these new rookies can win me over? What a joke. Luoya was stunned for a moment, and then a contemptuous smile appeared on his face. Well, it's really a good job. Because Zephyr discovered Loya's body, suspected of being the power of the ice dragon that freezes time and space, and issued a gag order to all who knew, so the picture of him fighting the silverback great ape during the actual combat assessment never circulated. In addition, Keelung has been performing actual combat missions outside last month, and he didn't come back until today. He didn't understand Loya's information at all, but he just heard rumors about how strong he is. This led the veteran in the elite battalion to miscalculate Loya's strength. He thought that Loya used a trick or something to kill the silver great ape, and his strength was not strong. The first person, the disciple of General Qingzi, was blown out. To sum up, Keelung felt that he could try to challenge Loya. As long as he can defeat Loya, the so-called strongest recruit, then his prestige in the elite camp can be improved to a higher level, and he can get more guidance from Zephyr. Even, it is not impossible to challenge Hansa one day. So, seeing the undisguised contempt on Loya's face, Keelung took advantage of the situation and said, Hey. What are you looking at, kid? Do you want to be beaten? Aludo was silent, Hansa was also silent. Brother Jerome took out the fruit gummies. You and I shared one by one, ready to watch the play. Brothers Aludo and Jerome are the ones who know Loya the best in the elite camp, the kind of unmatched power that can be seen in the playful battle of Loya in the morning is Madara. Keelung is indeed very strong, stronger than Minged, otherwise, with his character, he would not have thanked Keelung just now. But what about fighting this monster? Hansa didn't come up to smooth the game. Although it is a rule that Zephyr has acquiesced to by beating new recruits by veterans, but if you still do this when the target of your beating is stronger than you, you can meet the end. Hearing Keelung's provocation, Loya patted the dust on his buttocks, helped Aldo to stand up, and knelt down for a long time and his legs were a little numb. It's just that the latter trembled and said with a frown, Loya, can you take your hand away? Huh, hearing Aludo's words, Loya reacted, I'm sorry. I forgot. He took his hand away, and on Arudo's clothes, a handprint formed by an ice cube appeared on it, and the biting cold air drifted away with the airflow. This is a new ability that Roha tried to develop after integrating modeling magic. Facing a guy who is as fast as a mole, his ice armor will sometimes be attacked before it reaches the perfect level. This is not perfect defensively. So Loya plans to develop a permanent ice armor, the effect can be weak. It doesn't matter, as long as it can withstand the first wave of attacks when it is attacked. The difficulty is not very big, the only problem is that it is a persistent process. To keep it forever is not so much development as it is habit formation. Therefore, he forgot that his hands were still covered with ice film, and Loya directly attached Aldo with one hand, which caught Aldo by surprise. Regardless of Aludo's resentful eyes, Loya looked at Keelung playfully. Are you sure you want to fight me? I told you it would be very embarrassing, believe me. You kid. Keelung felt insulted. Who was he? Elite camp members. After all, you, a new recruit, are so arrogant, you don't take yourself too seriously. So, Keelung sneered, stepped forward quickly, and punched Loya with a fist. He would use his fist to tell Loya that he came to the elite camp, and it was the dragon who had to be coiled for me, and the tiger who had to lie down for me. In fact, it has become routine for elite battalion veterans to beat recruits. Every recruit who can come here used to be the leader of the recruit camp, proud of himself. This pride is a good thing, but also a deficiency. The good thing is that the mentality of not being resigned to being behind allows them to work hard and keep the motivation to move forward no matter what kind of difficulties they face. However, in actual combat, if you still maintain this kind of arrogance, if you are arrogant and claim to be the best in the world, you will die very quickly. Except for the incident of Zephyr being attacked, in fact, members of the elite battalion will die every few years while performing actual combat missions, and 9 out of 10 of them are due to careless underestimation of the enemy. The group of pirates, like the protagonist Luffy and others, has a pitiful number of upright guys in battle. More insidious cunning, cruel and ruthless scum. Sneak attack, poisoning, taking hostages, pretending to surrender and other means should not be too slippery. Because of this, the mentality of negligence needs to be eradicated, and that's why Zephyr has set the order of guidance. Give the veterans an excuse to beat the recruits. Chapter 48 The New Chief. Keelung's speed is really good. In the elite camp, his strength has been hovering around the group. Even if he fights with such good players as the Aludo Jerome brothers, he can still play well. But unfortunately he met Loya. The punching fist was still far away, and the roaring fist wind had already blown the ends of Loya's hair. Facing Keelung's swift and violent attack, Loya raised his hand slowly. Well, I knew about these things. Snapped. A crisp slap sounded, and Keelung's moving body seemed to have been pressed the pause button, standing in front of Loya. The veterans were all dumbfounded, looking at Keelung with a red face. On Keelung's face, 5 clear fingers were imprinted there, in stark contrast to his pale complexion. Brothers Aldo and Jerome also looked at Loya, who calmly retracted his hand, thinking of the battle in the morning, and shuddered, at that time. I'm afraid Loya didn't just keep his hand. It's that simple. In fact, it was true. At that time, Roha did not even use 40% of his body strength except for dragon-slaying magic. The dragon's body officially ran to the third, and the increase in Loya's physique was astonishing. Even the holder of his system was shocked by that power. Now, as long as he learns and skillfully uses the 6 naval styles, even if he doesn't use any magic, he can hang Rob Ludge, who is known as the most genius of the world government in 800 years. What's more, this group of unnamed dragon tricks in the original work. But this is also the reason why Loya felt a headache after the battle in the morning. In the current elite camp, he really can't get a few energy points. Keelung was a little stunned by the strong counterattack, and he recovered after a while, raised his head in disbelief, and looked at Loya in shock. You bastard. I want to. Snapped. Before Keelung's cruel words were finished, Loya slapped him again. What's new in trash talk? It's nothing more than some villa-in-specific lines. Loya, who has read online articles, is not interested in reviewing it on him, and this will not increase the score of the college entrance examination. This slap, Loya didn't keep his hand. For this kind of chattering guy, it's better to shut him up as soon as possible. As a result, under the watchful eyes of the veterans present, Keelung instantly disappeared in place at a speed faster than his shaving. Then there was a bang, and a huge pit was smashed at the root of the wall. The hard stone slabs in the courtyard flew out, and after losing power, they fell from the sky like rain. In the pit, the right side of Keelung's face, who had passed out in a coma, bulged high, his face was covered in blood, and a few kiba teeth fell from his mouth unsatisfactorily, exhaling more and less intake. Loya clapped his hands, and then brushed off the dust that didn't exist on his clothes. Ah, it's dangerous, but fortunately I left a little bit of strength. Hey, Loya. Didn't you beat him to death? Aludo looked at Loya worriedly and said, Instructor Zephyr will definitely punish you when he comes back, but if you kill your companions, you will be sent to the advanced city. At this moment, the veterans have no time to watch the play, and when they heard Arudo's words, some of them jumped out of the pit nervously to rescue Keelung, while the other part took out their weapons and aimed at Loya. This made Loya look slightly sideways. From Arudo's tone, he could tell that whether it was Keelung or Minged, he must have done all the bad things, and he was the unpopular kind of guy in the elite camp. But even for the two of them, the fate of being beaten is unknown, but the rest of the veterans did not show the slightest schadenfreude. On the contrary, the hatred in their eyes was clearly visible. Loya suddenly remembered a sentence on the internet, weak chickens always like to hug together to keep warm. In terms of strength, this elite camp is indeed not the opponent of the monsters of the year, but the monsters of the year are not as united as the weak chickens of this year. Which is good or bad, at this moment Loya can't come to a conclusion. Aldo looked at Loya nervously, his words were serious, but his body was slightly sideways, blocking between the veteran and Loya. Looking from the back, it was Aldo who was guarding against Loya's escape and was ready to intercept it at any time, but from Loya's point of view, was this not helping him to block the veteran and making it easier for him to leave? Loya felt warm about this, patted Aldo's thigh, and comforted, Relax. Did you forget that I slapped twice? The first time I was testing his anti-strike ability, the second time, it was stuck at the limit of his endurance. He definitely didn't die, trust me. Aldo shook his head, refused to move half a minute, and winked anxiously at Loya. Hey. Chatting with smart people is easy, chatting with stupid people is hard work. Loya sighed in her heart, but her impatience was gone. Swish. At this time, the chief of the elite battalion named Hansa moved over with Xiao, and Aludo almost slapped him in fright. He coughed lightly and said to Arudo, It's okay, Keelung just passed out, but the trauma is very serious, and there is no fear of life. Yes, so it is. Aldo scratched the back of his head embarrassedly, thinking that Keelung was killed by Loya just now, and wanted to help Loya escape in a hurry. Now that he heard that Keelung was fine, the feeling of betraying his companions surged up, and while embarrassed, he smirked like a child weighing a ton. That's good. Everyone is alive, so it's delicious to eat. Hee hee. What a fool. Loya didn't look at him and said in a low voice. When Zephyr came back, he was surprised to find that there were many fewer people in the courtyard. The 3 new recruits are gone, as is the gangster duo that elite battalion is known for. This made him a little confused, but it was not that he had never encountered such a situation before, and he might have gone back, so he adjusted his mood for a moment, and asked in a deep voice, So, do you think the order is good? One with me. After speaking, Zephyr went directly into the attic without looking back. Loya, who was feasting on the meat and bones that Aludo brought from the kitchen, heard the words, wiped out the meat on the bones, wiped the grease on his mouth, and stood up. Then, I'll be the first one, I'm sure you all have no opinions, right? None of the veterans said a word, but quietly looked at Bibi Hansa, who was sitting cross-legged in the corridor. In the past, the Order of Guidance has always been led by Hughes, which is beyond doubt. But today's situation really makes them a little uncertain. Feeling the sight from all around, Hansa opened his eyes, and an inexplicable fighting spirit gushed out, but he was immediately restrained. He glanced at Loya, who was waiting for an answer with his head tilted, and nodded quietly, please. The veterans took a deep breath. Could it be that even Hansa is not sure of defeating that guy? Otherwise, according to Hansa's cruel and combative character in the past, he would never give up this position. In the elite camp, the so-called strength ranking is not 1, 2, 3 or 4 on the surface. This ranking will not appear on any paper, but is simply the order of entry when Zephyr conducts single-person guidance. This is the default rule of the elite camps of all dynasties. Hansa's, please, means that he has handed over the position of the chief of the elite battalion. From today, Loya will be the new chief of the elite battalion. Loya was a little surprised at Hansa's simplicity. From Hansa, Loya smelled a stench full of blood, which meant that he was not a good person. However, although Loya is not arrogant, she is full of confidence. Nodding his thanks to Hansa, he turned and entered the attic. Chapter 49 Zephyr's Guidance. Hey, the mobile phone assistant sucks. Your reward has never been displayed. I didn't see it until I flipped through the fan list today, sorry. Loya had long wanted to get the 6 naval and domineering training methods, but because of the unequal rank and status, neither Zephyr nor Kuzan had an excuse to teach him these things. Now, the most important moment has finally come. Zephyr walked into the attic, did not stop, and went straight to the place where the bookshelf was placed in the attic. He grabbed the middle partition and pulled it left and right. The bookshelf slowly retreated to the left and right, and a bright room appeared in front of Loya. Come in, remember to close the door. Zephyr gave an order and walked in. It's the same as the villain's secret base. Loya was amazed, followed Zephyr in, turned and closed the door. Before he could take a closer look, a strong wind hit his head. Bang! Zephyr's attack is still the familiar formula, the familiar taste, and it is not something that Loya can't stop. And it was still a sneak attack, taking the first mover advantage, so Loya's fist was real, and he slammed it directly against the wall. Pulling himself off with force and touching the big bag on his head, Loya pointed Kiba and shouted, "Bastard! Why beat me? Even if you are a teacher, you can't do this. Huh, how dare you scold me?" Zephyr's face turned black, armament hockey was wrapped around his hands, his prosthetic limbs were wrapped, and his fists were hardened. The next second, one left and one right, the overwhelming fist fell on Loya. Asshole right. Even so. Why did I hit you? You dare to say that those little bastards were not driven away by you? With Tony's half bucket of water, they can hurt Mingd and Keelung. You're so stupid to think of me. Hearing this, Loya, who was about to fight back, blinked and smiled embarrassedly. Well, it's a bit harder, I'll pay attention next time, pay attention. Also, next time. Zephyr's fist stopped suddenly a little dejected. The disciple he taught me so easily was beaten down by the savage Loya. What do you think he planned? You bastard. Taking back his arrogance, Zifasheng waved his hand reluctantly, took out the cigar and put it in his mouth. Loya took it out in Kabuto and threw it away. He used the dragon game that he had learned because of his dream of going to a bar to pick up girls. He drew a fancy arc in the air, lit the lighter, and brought it to Zephyr's mouth. Zephyr was stunned for a moment, then an unknown anger surged into his heart, and he scolded his head and face. I have this spare time to strengthen my training. Can a lighter play so smoothly as a meal? This small training room is made of high-quality fine iron. Except for the door disguised as a bookshelf, there is only an emergency exit on the opposite wall. Zephyr stood in the field and kept demonstrating, while Loya sucked his nosebleed and kept an eye on Zephyr's movements. What I said above is the basic knowledge. Navy 6 forms is a physical technique that goes beyond the limits of the human body. With your current physique, it is not a problem to be a master. Among them, iron blocks, shaving, and paper painting are the most important. 3 techniques. Quote. Iron block and paper painting are the easiest and the most difficult. Learning them will benefit your master's body a lot, but you need to explore it yourself. I won't repeat it here. If you shave, I will slow down the speed. Look good. Zephyr, who was standing in front of Loya, spoke again and again, and with a kick, he moved nearly 10 meters away in an instant. Oh, so it is. Loya clapped his hands and said as if he was enlightened. As a traverser, he naturally knows the basic principles of shaving, but he has tried, no matter what, he can't step on the ground more than 10 times in 0.36 seconds, the encyclopedia says, to achieve the effect of explosive movement. Now he understands that this technique is not a simple force technique, but more importantly, the coordination of the body. When Zephyr used the shave, he could feel that his force was not strong, it was just the trembling of his leg muscles at that moment, which looked so pleasing to the eye and full of rhythm. Like playing the piano, gently and gracefully. Like Roja's previous attempt, it was completely wrong to want to smash the ground. Zephyr had already given him his car key, and Loya could just hit the accelerator for the rest of the journey. Moving back again, Zephyr folded his arms and looked at Loya. Kuzan told me that your physique is different from ordinary people because of your fruit ability. This is a good and a bad thing. The good thing is that you don't have to work hard to break your physical limits and improve your physique like us, as long as you develop fruits step by step. But the disadvantage is also here, because the strength is too easy to improve, you have a serious lack of awareness of your own strength. Not to mention total control. Quote. Hearing Zephyr's words, Loya nodded slightly. The fact is indeed as Zephyr said, the increase brought by the dragon's body, even his master felt frightened, the sudden huge power, relying on the talent acquired in the dark, Loya can only superficially control. Not to mention total control. Loya sometimes even suspects that this system may be selling dog meat at the head of a sheep, the dragon slaying magic as a gift, and the body of the dragon as the dry goods. Seeing that Loya was in deep thought, Zephyr did not interrupt him immediately, and when he gradually came to his senses, he continued, the sixth naval form is an extreme body technique that the Navy has integrated and completed after 100 years. It is not a simple move, but in order for people to control their own creations more perfectly. After you are familiar with shaving, moon steps, languid feet and finger guns, don't fall into the practice of iron blocks and paper painting. Quote. Speaking of this, Zephyr remembered Loya's ability to move on ice cubes, and warned, you can create ice cubes in the air to move, which is really surprising, but it doesn't mean that the moon step is right for you. Useless. On the contrary, more refined moon steps, paired with your unique movement patterns, will make you faster. Quote. In the following time, Zephyr briefly explained the problems arising from Loya's cultivation. Zephyr's guidance pointed directly to the essence, and some of the bottlenecks in cultivation that had been blocked for a long time disappeared in an instant, making Loya addicted to learning. Although Kuzan also taught Loya before, can he compare with Zephyr? It's not that what Kuzan said is wrong, but Kuzan can always only point out one big goal. As for how to subdivide the plan and how to apply it to Loya, he has never been very clear. Thinking about Kuzan's character, Loya said that he thought too much. However, it is precisely because of Kuzan's comprehensive guidance that Loya has tried everything, laid a good foundation and accumulated a lot of experience. Now, after Zephyr's explanation, the past experience has suddenly turned into nourishment for his growth, like a dry sponge, absorbing water as much as possible. After waiting for Zephyr to finish speaking, Loya scratched his head and said embarrassedly, Teacher Zephyr. Can you teach me the way of practicing domineering? The Chinese among the travelers all know a saying, greed is not enough to chew. What Zephyr taught him today was enough for him to drill and grind for a long time, but when he thought of being able to come into contact with one of the top abilities in the One Piece world, it was difficult for Loya to contain his anxiety. In response to this, Zephyr did not refuse the expected stern words, but shook his head helplessly. I knew you would ask this. In fact, from Zephyr's point of view, Loya already has the foundation for practicing domineering. It's just that because of Kuzan's concerns, he never taught Loya. Although domineering is mysterious, for a powerhouse of their level, it has long lost its freshness. When you can cultivate, how to cultivate, and how to strengthen, you have a complete set of theoretical and practical knowledge. Hearing Loya's question, Zephyr, who had already had a draft in his heart, briefly introduced the domineering way of practice to Loya. However, although domineering cultivation has become a system, the teacher's personal guidance is still indispensable. These cannot be understood verbally. Just like Luffy in the original book, even if Luffy has been able to use his arrogance from time to time, Rayleigh still continues to teach him. But for Loya, this talented penultimate disciple, even without Kuzan's request, Zephyr doesn't mind spending some time and energy to teach Loya well. Chapter 50 Practice. In fact, as a traveler, Loya is all too familiar with the power of domineering. But this kind of familiarity is only on paper, and I don't know the specific cultivation method at all. In the three-color domineering, armament hockey and observation hockey are the powers that Loya wants most. The level of chaos in the fairy tale world and pirate world is completely different. The islands are independent of each other, and it is not unusual for anything to happen. Moreover, there are various BT devil fruits, and the ability to take people's lives inadvertently should not be too much. The Dragon Slayer system has indeed given Loya a great help, turning him from a small clerk who has no power to become a little powerhouse in the world of One Piece. But as the so-called do as the locals do, you still have to learn what you should learn. Because of the vulgarity here, Loya can live better. The three-color domineering has been passed down in the One Piece world to this day, and it is regarded as a mainstream high-end combat power, which has been verified by countless blood. Among them, the importance of observation hockey and armament hockey is self-evident. Whether it is perceiving the enemy's attack, perceiving the danger, or enhancing the attack power and defense power, the effect against the fruit ability is too great. Zephyr patiently finished talking about the cultivation method, paused for a while, and waited for Loya to remember all these before continuing. I know that you are very strong and talented, whether it is 6 forms or domineering, you must be able to get started quickly. But don't forget one thing, there is no end to cultivation. Cultivation is not a battle. You can fight to the death to break through the encirclement. On the contrary, it needs to be done gradually, with tension and relaxation, and don't be too hasty. For Zephyr's words, Loya agreed. At least, he has one more reason to sleep in. Leaving the training room, Hansa, the former chief of the elite battalion, sat cross-legged at the door of the attic, and opened his eyes when Loya just came out. At this time, Hansa's face was calm, his pale complexion matched his emotionless pupils, and he was as silent as a corpse. But Roha, who had 6 keen senses, could sense that at this moment Hansa had a strong fighting spirit that was about to overflow. Looking straight at Loya, Hansa stood up with a scabbard and walked inward. At the moment of passing by with Loya, he whispered, "See you at the training ground in a month." After all, Hansa walked into the training room. As if he didn't hear it, Loya walked forward calmly, but a wisp of cold air that was difficult for others to detect, directly smeared Hansa's hilt at that moment, freezing his fingers and the hilt together. This is Loya's answer. If you want to fight, fight. Loya, you came out, what did Teacher Zephyr teach you? Seeing Loya coming out, Aldo threw away the iron tower in his hand and walked over excitedly. You must know that the first time of recruits is always very brief, because recruits who have just joined the elite battalion generally have nothing to learn, and Zephyr will let them leave after a few words of encouragement. But Loya was different. He went in for a full 2 hours, which is not common even among veterans. Facing Aldo's question, Loya tilted his head and nodded to Simon and Minnie who were supporting Tony, and then replied, 6 styles, and domineering. As soon as these words came out, the air seemed to stop flowing, and countless eyes locked on Loya, unable to believe his ears. Aludo is the stupidest, but he has the thickest nerves. He was just stunned for a moment, and then patted Loya on the shoulder with a smile. Ha ha ha. You are really amazing, Loya. The first time you received the instruction, Teacher Zephyr taught you the 6 styles. And domineering. I didn't learn the 6 styles until half a year later, and I started learning domineering a year later. That's because of the muscles in your head. The Jerome brothers who were onlookers complained word by word, and at the same time looked at Loya with a look of surprise. Directly teach the 6 styles and domineering, doesn't it mean that Loya's current physique has reached the requirements? This is really big news. Even in the elite camp, there are very few people who can learn domineering, and there have been only a few in the past. Especially armament hockey, this ability requires an incomparably strong physique to support, even more severe than the Navy's sixth form. Aruduo is stupid, but in terms of physical fitness, he is really not afraid of anyone. After all, he is also a fierce man who has done such things as tearing murlocs by hand. It was because of his strong physique that Zephyr agreed to teach him armament hockey. Saying goodbye to the elite camp companions, Loya stepped on the ice cubes to the small square and began to practice. Shaving, iron, paper painting, shaving, explosive moving body technique. Moonstep is a movement method extended on the basis of shaving, and the finger gun can be regarded as a prelude to the iron. Loya recalled Zephyr's words and meditated on the various cultivation techniques of the six forms. After carefully recalling the number of times he was bullied by Mole and Kuzan in the past month, Loya's eyes flashed with determination. Then let's start with shaving. Learning the 6 naval styles will allow Loya to better understand his own strength, and at the same time, it will also lay the foundation for his future domineering practice. After cultivating it to the realm of returning life, it is even more terrifying for the improvement of strength. In the use of the body, Loya has always been in a very awkward position. Just like a gun, it obviously has the performance of a sniper rifle, but it can only play the effect of a pistol. 6 forms is a physical technique that allows the potential to be fully realized. The practice of shaving is difficult, but it is not difficult. In addition to the rigid requirement of physical fitness beyond the limits of the human body, the more important thing is the coordination of the body. This is the hardest. Loya breathed slowly, trying to keep herself relaxed. Then, with a sudden kick of footsteps, the ground shattered with a bang, leaving a cobweb-like pit in place, and the whole person turned into a black line and suddenly rushed forward. Bang! The opposite wall was broken, and Loya disappeared into the dust. Outside the small square, the regular patrolling Navy swallowed and took out the phone bug. Hello, is it logistics? Remember to have someone repair the small square tomorrow. Not the floor, this time it's the wall. The wall is gone again. Wow. Loya pushed away the stones on his body and crawled up from the ground with a sullen face. Cut. Is it too hard? It's fast, but it's not a shave. Come again. Swish. Loya disappeared on the spot, the pile of stones under his feet exploded instantly, and the patrol team that was hit by the splashing gravel cried for his father and mother. Next second, Roja, who appeared again, stopped, sniffed the smell of fresh paint on the bricks just a finger away, and smiled. Ha, I won't hit the wall a second time. Cultivation is a long process. Luoya is not Zhao Rishan, and there is no extravagant hope of success in 3 days. After trying again and again and adjusting again and again, deafening explosions sounded from time to time in the small square, the floor cracked, the walls collapsed, and dust was lingering, the whole demolition site. Judging from the practice of shave, the overall difficulty of the Navy's 6-style practice can be seen in Madara. Just this trick makes it so difficult to become a master. What Zephyr said before is too light. 6 poses not only require physical strength beyond the limits of the human body, but also strength, speed, physical strength, and muscle coordination. It was not until the night got dark that Loya finally stopped moving. At this time, he collapsed among the rubble in a big character, sweating down uncontrollably. This feeling of exhaustion and powerlessness, Loya has not felt for a long time. Now he is going to do the squats in the boot camp. He can start from breakfast to dinner, or carry the heaviest discus on his back. But practicing the 6 forms, in just half a day, made Loya reach the limit. What a great feeling, quote. Looking up at the stars in the sky, Loya smiled contentedly. Chapter 51 Loya Who Created Myths. Time passed day by day, and in the blink of an eye, a month passed. In the special alloy training room of the Navy headquarters, Loya, like a boxer, stepped lightly and jumped a few times. Then, he disappeared in the blink of an eye, leaving a deep footprint on the alloy ground, representing that he once stood here. Almost at the same time as he disappeared, Loya's figure appeared on the other side of the room, facing the 3-inch thick iron plate, with his arms retracted, his index finger, middle finger, and ring finger stretched out in a claw-like manner. Finger gun 8 children. Fingers as hard as steel ripped apart frantically on the iron plate. Obviously they were only 2 hands, but they suddenly turned into claw shadows that covered the iron plate. The incomprehensible attack hit the iron plate, and the only way to tell from the explosion of the air and the sour twisting sound of the iron plate was how much damage it was suffering. Suddenly, the inertia in his hand weakened, and Roja's movements slammed, and his left foot swept out from bottom to top. Land feet. Before he finished speaking, Loya immediately appeared diagonally above the iron plate, and the afterimage left on the spot continued his actions just now. For a moment, Loya used Lan's feet again, and then appeared directly in front. Lanjiao Sanryu. 3 moon kiba-shaped air blades shot out, and in the next instant, they hit the iron block at the same time. Boom. Finally, the iron plate that couldn't bear the torture exploded and fell to the ground. Loya jumped out of the air, and with the habit of protecting his body, he blocked countless pieces of iron that were no less powerful than bullets. Because it is a training room specially made by the Navy, there is no soil here, and naturally no smoke can be raised. But because of this, Zephyr was startled. In a month, not only did you learn to point guns, shave, moonwalk and slap your feet, but have you even developed new abilities? Since a month ago, Sengoku received a complaint and threw Loya from the small square here, the next training Zephyr has been watching. It took only 20 days from when Loya came into contact with the 6th form of the Navy to when he learned these 4 moves. This is the 6th form, the cultivation is extremely difficult, and the Navy's strongest physical technique. Generally speaking, only the powerhouses such as Vice Admiral can use it proficiently. Rob Lucci is also known as the strongest in the CP 800 years of Judicial Island. This is a time span of 800 years. It has long been not a situation where there is no one in 100,000, but a real peerless genius. This level of rarity is enough to prove the difficulty of the 6th form. It took nearly half a year for Zephyr himself and Garp to reach the level of Loya. This speed attracted the attention of Kong Kuo, who was still a vice admiral at the time, and called him a monster. He was promoted exceptionally, and was brought into his subordinates to cultivate meticulously, so that the later plot. Who knows what happened in the past? Please leave a message. This is my brain, it is not on the encyclopedia. And now, Loya ripped it all to shreds. He's not breaking records, he's creating myths. In a daze, Loya has come to Zephyr, that. Teacher Zephyr, do you think my progress is still acceptable? This is the standard to get the benefits and still be good, commonly known as being cheap. Zephyr, who was woken up, squinted and glanced at him. Loya had a towel on his shoulders, stood without standing, looking at Zephyr with a giggle, his face darkened, and he punched him. You are the Navy, stand up for Lao Su. Shoo. Loya is like a piece of paper, flutteringly dodging Zephyr's attack. When dodging the attack, Roja exclaimed in surprise, I actually used it. It seems that I can learn all the 6 styles soon. Having said that, Loya continued to lick his face and leaned forward. Ah, what's the matter, Teacher Zephyr, why are you angry? You should be happy to have such an outstanding disciple as me, right? Thanks to the powerful increase brought by the dragon's body, after a month of practice, Loya has learned so much at a speed that he can't believe, just like Zhao, Yi, and Long possessed. The main difficulty in practicing the 6 forms of the Navy, physical strength, which is self-defeating in the face of Loya, who has the body of a dragon. As long as Loya can master skills and maintain physical coordination, everything will go smoothly like that, naturally. In the last few days, Loya also developed the extended skills of the 6 styles, the 8 children and the 3 sun and moon. In the process of practicing the finger gun, Loya found that the finger gun was slightly weaker in the face of large-scale attacks. If you don't want to resist the attack and get close to the enemy, then there is only one way to avoid it. In the end, the reason is still in the use of the gun itself. As the name implies, the finger gun is to let the fingertips have the attack power of bullets, and it is not a problem to cultivate to the depths to penetrate the steel. But the length of a person's arm is limited, and a gun is not a real gun after all. Therefore, he developed the 8 young girls who are suitable for both distance and nearness, not only the rigidity of their own, but also the power of the wind pressure brought by the claw shadows should not be underestimated. But still terrifyingly strong, even in the face of a wide area attack, it can rely on countless air blades to tear through the opponent's firepower circle and make up for its shortcomings. In addition to pointing guns, the most obvious disadvantage is the feet. This move is the same as the moon step, and it is also an extension of shaving, but the focus of the two sides is different. However, there is a problem that when using land feet, because the focus of force is already on the legs, it is impossible to move at that moment. If you are facing a master who can use arrogance and domineering, no matter how fast you moved before, when you stop and launch an attack, it is enough to prepare the other party. This is probably the reason why both Zephyr and Karp have titles in their hands, a Black Wrist, and an Iron Fist. They keep their feet moving and attack with their hands. However, the power and low consumption of Lanjiao are really good, and it is the strongest spear in the 6 styles, which is really hard to let go. In order to make up for this shortcoming, Loya pondered for an hour and finally came up with a solution. Since the problem is not the power of Lanjiao, then it is enough to make the attack more unpredictable. Relying on the tough physique that he can no longer be called a human, there is no need to worry about muscle damage. Loya forcibly joined Lanjiao on the way to use the shave, not to slow down, not to take any tricks, but to carry the force that is enough for ordinary use. As a side effect of muscle cracking, he launches a foot attack while moving at a high speed. So far, it has been able to do 3 consecutive times without affecting the combat effectiveness. Because it can be used 3 times in a row, it is named Sanryu. It doesn't matter what it means, it just sounds nice. Similar to K-Roctal's 3 Sun Moon Sand Dunes move, Loya can also use it, but it is too easy to be avoided. Of course, it doesn't mean that the rest of the moves have no weaknesses and need to be improved, but because Loya is most familiar with the gun and shaving, which allows him to have sufficient experience to develop them. Although the punch just used only 4 layers of strength, Zephyr is different from Kuzan. He is a pure physique expert. His 4 layers of strength were enough to knock Loya down in the past, but now, Loya actually avoided it with the paper painting that was not working. Faced with such a situation, Zephyr covered his face and sighed, "I really don't know how long I can teach you." Seeing that this disciple is so excellent. "Teacher Zephyr, are you sad?" "That's good. Anyway, I don't need to prove my current strength anymore. You can cancel the actual combat mission next month." Loya said his purpose, but what he got was a meaningful smile from Zephyr. Cancellation. It is impossible to cancel. This is the rule of the elite camp, and no one can make an exception. Speaking of this, Zephyr patted Loya's shoulder comfortingly. Because of this month's high-intensity training, it is still the 6 moves that tap the potential of the human body. Loya's body that has stopped developing for many years has grown a lot taller. Now he is only standing with a head shorter than Zephyr. It's easy, you don't have to tilt your hands down as before. Just go back and prepare the seasickness medicine. Don't worry, I will arrange the fastest warship for you. In Loya's eyes, Zephyr's smile at the moment was as hideous as a ghost. The master and the apprentice walked out of the training room, and in the corridor, they made jokes all the way, and they were very happy. At this time, Zephyr's eyes swept across the thriving town in the distance, and suddenly stood still. There is a large town where the Marine Fodor family lives. Although Loya has never been there, the Jerome brothers who love sweets and are good at moonwalking will sneak into the town from time to time and buy a lot of cookies, cakes, fruit candies. What to share with you, he is relatively familiar with there. because all he knew was the location of the candy house pastry shop. Zepha's expression was calm, but there was a trace of undisguised sadness in his eyes. Probably, remembering my family. Loya thought so. But he immediately showed a smile full of energy. Teacher, do you want to eat candy? I still have the fruit fudge that Jerome bought. Would you like me to give it to you? From the position where Zepha was standing, the most eye-catching thing was the huge 3-story pink Yuhi building that was painted in the appearance of fruit candy. Chapter 52 The Dying Hansa Recommendation. Collection. The big tree is really flattered to receive so many rewards today. Boom. Bang. A huge explosion suddenly occurred in the lower area of the headquarters fortress, and even Sengoku in the office of the marshal at the top felt the strong vibration. The Navy soldier in charge of duty ran over in panic with a gun, but only saw Zepha in a purple suit. In front of Zepha, there was a large hole in the wall of the corridor. The masonry dog Kiba on the edge of the hole was staggered, and several cracks had spread outward like a cobweb. Zepha's face was very bad, black and oily, the armament hockey on his fist had not receded, and the whole person exuded an inexplicable terrifying aura. Hearing the footsteps, Zepha turned his head with a gloomy face, looked around, and almost scared the group of soldiers to wet their pants. What are you doing? Haven't you seen the teacher educate the disciple? Yes, sorry. The Navy saluted like a frightened quail, and then ran away without looking back. Just kidding, looking at Zepha's expression, he will definitely be beaten if he continues to chatter. As for the big hole in the wall, let the big guys solve it. The Navy headquarters imposes heavy penalties on vandalism, and at the simplest level, it takes a month to clean the toilet. But considering the identity of the other party, it is a bit special, and it is beyond the scope of the patrol team. Shoo! At this moment, a figure appeared beside Zepha. The person who came was holding a plastic bag in his hand, nibbling at the senbei and sticking his head out of the hole. Yo! Look at Zepha, that stinky boy ran away. Looking from the entrance of the cave, a figure falling in midair turned over and adjusted its posture, then stepped on the air, and ran to the direction of the recruit camp several times. After learning the moonwalk, Loya's movement speed in the air became very fast. Because he can not only use the moon step, but also condense ice out of thin air in the air to step on his feet. In this way, use the shave acceleration first, and then use the moon step to perform the second stage acceleration. Almost as soon as Garp finished speaking, he disappeared into the building complex of the recruit camp. Garp didn't wait for the reaction he wanted, and asked strangely, Zepha, why don't you go after him? That kid ran away. Shut up, Zepha roared, his face turning blue. Chase. What to chase? In the ground and near air range, Zepha's speed is indeed higher than that of Loya. But at high altitudes, Zepha couldn't take Loya in the same way. Not to mention that Loya can also fly with dragon scales for a short time, and he can't keep up with the speed and flexibility. Because he is often bullied by shaving, Loya spends the most energy on shaving, and the speed is no longer what it used to be. And wouldn't it be just for you to watch the show if I went after it? You think I'm stupid? Zepha gave Garp a sidelong glance, turned and left with a snort. Behind him, Garp blinked blankly, then took out the senbei with a smile and continued to eat. This old guy, you are still shy. Garp didn't know what happened just now, but he could understand Zepha's expression now. Underneath that anger lies a kind of fulfillment. After losing his family for many years, this is the first time Zepha has shown such eyes in front of them. Although he has always regarded the Navy as his home, the members of the elite battalion are his sons and daughters. But never had such mixed emotions been shown to any of them. Thinking of this, Garp nibbled at the senbei and murmured, if his son hadn't died, he would probably be the same age as Loya now. If that kid Long hadn't defected from the Navy, I'd probably look like this too. Malin Fodor, the boot camp cafeteria. Threw the basin heavily in front of Loya with a look of disgust. The basin was full of food, and the air was filled with a tempting aroma. You kid, can't you eat at the elite camp? Do you know that you have already eaten up my mother's stock for tomorrow? Well, what does it matter? Lao Gao, who had bulging cheeks, sucked up a whole grilled fish in a few bites. Spitting out the fishbone in his mouth, he smiled flatteringly. Besides, the meals in the elite camp are too nutritious, so the taste is really not to mention. My mouth has faded out of my mouth. How can you do it, Ms. S? Yummy. Quote. By the way, that lobster still there? Hearing this, Ms. S had a black line on her head, raised her eyes, moved her mouth, but made no sound. Then, she sighed, turned around and went into the kitchen to continue fiddling. Get out of here soon after eating. Really, it's bad luck for the old lady to stand on your rice bucket. Yes. Loya raised his hand and answered, then quickened the movement in his mouth. Just then, the phone bug in Loya Kabuto rang. Blue blue blue, blue blue blue. This is what Zephyr asked him to hold. Because of the problem of cultivation, Loya needs a lot of time to contact Zephyr. Although when you want to find Loya, you can usually find him in the cafeteria, but the time spent going back and forth is not wasted. Wiping his hands on the tablecloth, Loya took out the phone bug from Kabuto. Gotcha. Hello, is that Loya? The pale yellow-skinned phone bug instantly turned pale, and his large eyes subtly imitated the other party's tired but wary eyes. Hearing this voice, Loya froze for a moment, then grinned widely. BB Hansa. I thought you forgot your war contract. Cough, cough, cough. There was a cough on the opposite side, and Loya even heard the sound of vomiting blood. Without waiting for Hansa to answer, Loya took the lead and said, Hey. Are you sure you want to fight me like this? It will kill people. Hansa was frail and sickly since childhood, which is quite similar to Simon. However, he was not as lucky as Simon, who was born into poverty, surrounded by numerous famous doctors of supplements, and his body was carefully nursed back to health. But his weak physique could not conceal his talent. He quickly emerged after joining the Navy, and he has gone from being a passerby to today. It's just that, because of the excessive development of potential, the body is overdrawn. No, the pressure is too harsh, and now he is terminally ill. His formidable strength was acquired in exchange for his lifespan. In order to challenge Loya, this month, he tried his best to cultivate, and Zephyr shook his head when he saw it. As an outsider, Loya is not qualified to evaluate Hansa's behavior. He did not carry a bloody feud like Tony did. Not like Minnie, working hard to prove herself amid the laughter. Not like Simon, for family honor. He just simply wanted to become stronger and paint a thick ink stroke for his short life. That's right, it's short-lived. Because Hansa is dying soon. As early as last year, Zephyr asked the best doctor in the Navy to diagnose Hansa. At that time, the doctor said that if Hansa stopped practicing and stopped working with others, he would still live to be 40 years old. Zephyr regretted that he wanted to arrange for Hansa to hang up in the headquarters, but was rejected by Hansa. Now, I'm afraid it's only a few years to live. Facing Loya's worries, Hansa smiled and said, It's okay. I don't want to die in a sick bed. If I can die in battle, it would be a great honor for me. Tisk, troublesome guy. Loya frowned slightly, but didn't say anything. Then, I'll be waiting for you in the arena at 2 o'clock tomorrow afternoon. After finishing speaking, Hansa hung up the phone. The pale yellow was covered with phone bugs again, and fell into a drowsiness with a snap. Loya looked at the phone bug in silence, and took out a piece of decorative greens from the basket to wake the phone bug. Come on, eat it. The last time I fed you was 3 days ago. Watching the phone bug nibbling at the greens, Loya fell into deep thought. Chapter 53 challenged the whole camp. In just 1 month, Loya learned 4 of the 6 moves. This news is no secret in the elite camp. There was even a wave in the Navy headquarters, which caused Kuzan to call to inquire. From the point of view of big data alone, learning the 6th naval form did not make Loya stronger. His strength is still so great, the Dragon Slayer magic is still incomprehensible. It's just that with the acquisition of the 6 styles, he finally made up for his shortcomings, and the moves became more comprehensive. From this point of view, the current Loya's strength in actual combat is at least twice as strong as before. The level of danger is incomparable. In the world of One Piece, aside from the weird devil fruits on the sea, there are only 4 elements to evaluate the battle: speed, strength, defense and skill. The previous Loya only occupied the advantage of strength and defense, and the powerful magic effect made him like a fort. Not to mention the elite battalion, no one in the Lieutenant General wants to compete with Roha, that is really. As Roha described, Dongfang washes the ground. Roaring alternates with Ice Wing, and a few hours is enough to destroy a town. However, the Lieutenant Generals at that time could still defeat Roha in close combat by virtue of their speed and combat experience higher than that of Roha. As long as they don't get hit by the attack entwined with blue energy, the ice armor alone can't stop them. And now, even the flying squirrels have to admit that in addition to lacking in experience, Loya, who has learned the 6 naval styles, has surpassed most of the lieutenant generals. This is the most terrifying part of Loya now, the ability is too comprehensive. When it comes to modeling magic, Loya has long been able to take care of himself, and he is not afraid of being a tough lieutenant. In terms of melee combat, the development and application of the 6 styles may still be a little short of fire, but it is no longer the tortoise shell that could only be passively beaten before. Once you are fully proficient and learn to be domineering, you can walk sideways within the range of the general in the headquarters. There are also those unique. I heard that it comes from the depths of memory, and is inherited from the dragon's magic. Even Zephyr dare not resist the roar of the ice dragon. But that's not all. But don't forget that Loya also has a trick, awakening pseudo-dragon transformation. Once he runs wild, he can be indistinguishable from Zephyr in a short period of time. Well, don't worry about how short time is. How can a man be short? It's too short to admit it. With such a powerful and comprehensive ability, Loya became famous in the Navy and received friendly glances from soldiers wherever he went. There are even good people spreading rumors that the next admiral in the Navy is Loya. Well, no need to get into the details about the stakes behind the rumors. Anyway, Loya made a lot of money. In the face of the now terrifying Loya, Hansa still hasn't lost his fighting spirit. Loya could see that he was not being stubborn, not being good-faced, but simply wanting to defeat Loya. Is this what is called a pure swordsman? This reminded Loya of one thing. In the original book, Zoro, who has been a pirate hunter for several years at sea, raised his sword to Mihawk, the world's greatest swordsman, even though he knew he would lose or even die. To be honest, Loya, who was born in a peaceful era, really couldn't understand these swordsmen. What to do after planning and doing what you can, these common senses are like nothing in their minds. Whenever I think about training, fighting, and becoming stronger. Just like now, Hansa decisively chose to challenge Loya. Zephyr didn't dissuade him. He knew that no matter what he said, he couldn't shake Hansa's determination. It's just that he mentioned it inadvertently, hoping that Loya will end the battle as soon as possible. After all, the longer the fight, the easier it is for Hansa's body to collapse. To this, Loya gave the answer: if I really have to rely on delaying tactics to defeat Hansa, I will be very disappointed in myself. The next day, the canteen of the Navy headquarters. Loya was burying his head and eating, and around him, members of the elite battalion had gathered around at some point, staring at Loya blankly. It wasn't until Loya finished eating that Aludo said awkwardly, "Loya, are you really going to duel with Hansa?" Luoya, who was drinking water, was almost choked by a mouthful of water. He finally managed to calm down and looked at Aldo with the eyes of the dead fish. "Hey, are you still struggling with this problem?" "But, Aludo wanted to say something else, but Simon Yuhi dragged him out of the crowd with a face, and pushing Aludo as a representative was simply a misstep. Tony and the rest looked at each other, stepped forward and said, "Indeed, none of this matters anymore. It's just, we don't want to lose our company. Hansa not only saved him, but also told Tony about his understanding of kendo during this month and helped him practice. After all, Zepha is not a swordsman, and many things about kendo can only point out problems, but cannot be studied in depth. At the beginning, Tony, who was arrogant, was still a little impatient, whether it was the kendo that was passed down from his family, or the Shira kendo that he learned later. Once the Grand Master, there will eventually be a place for him in this sea. Why should I learn your things? But with knowledge of Akatsuki Hansa's physical condition, Tony fell silent. Hansa is leaving a last word. Hearing Tony's words, Loya's hands paused and raised his eyelids to look at him. So, what are you going to say? Let me give up or let me show mercy? Do you know that doing this is better than Hansa's? It's hard to die. Tony's expression darkened, and he gripped the hilt of the sword unwillingly. Indeed, if Loya really releases water, Hansa will definitely be disappointed with them. This is not sympathy, but shame. The shame of a swordsman. If you can't return it with a sword, you might as well die. Tony was silent, and so were the rest of the elite battalion. For a while, the noisy cafeteria suddenly quieted down, and only the sound of Loya sucking in the juice could be heard. After a while, Minnie broke the silence. He took out a rubber band and tied his hair. If that's the case, then Loya, I'm going to challenge you now. Whoa! One stone shocked 1,000 waves. Everyone looked at Minnie in disbelief. What are you thinking? The other party is Loya. A real monster. Although he has been cultivating the sixth form for a month and has not participated in the battle, he can see just how terrifying the opponent's strength is from his previous battles. The scene from the day the recruits were besieged is still vivid in my mind. Did Minnie forget? Hey, Minnie, what are you doing? Tony asked in a deep voice, reaching out to pull Minnie's arm, but with a single pull, Minnie didn't move at all. Only by touching Tony did he realize that Minnie was shaking all over, her muscles were as stiff as wood, and her breathing was a little short. She is afraid. Tony thought. Suddenly Minnie looked at him and nodded seriously. What do you mean? Tony looked bewildered. At this moment, Simon's voice came from the back of the crowd. He flicked his bangs and brushed his hair back. Really? Then, I will challenge you too. Loya. Huh. Tony really didn't understand it now. Compared with Minnie, Simon was more restrained by Roja. His fruit ability could indeed penetrate Roja's ice armor with a full blow, but his weak constitution made him unable to activate it at all. Subsequent attacks. So what confidence does he have to challenge Loya? At this moment, the corner of Loya's mouth raised in the seat, and he laughed loudly. It's interesting, it's really interesting. Then, don't chatter, let's go together. You actually agreed. Let us go together. You're not afraid that you won't have the strength to duel Hansa later. Etc. Tony suddenly realized that, indeed, this is a good time to weaken Loya's strength. The rest of the people also figured out the reason, and looked at each other. The surging fighting spirit suddenly rose, and their breaths joined together, turning into a spear. The spear is directed at Loya. Loya, we're going to challenge you. Seeing this, Loya's eyes flashed with an elusive emotion. Although I have made an appointment with Hansa in the afternoon, but since you are courting death, I don't mind playing with you, trash fish. Chapter 54. Before the duel. Kevin has seen it. Have you seen the card title? In addition, because the collection finally broke 3,000, it's not easy after a month, so today's 3-watch. 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Marineford, Arena. The arena is the name of a large square behind the headquarters of the fortress, not the arena in the underground world. There are many people in the naval headquarters, and there are many squares. Some are purely used for training, some are meeting venues, and there is also a square in the name of competition. I don't know how many years ago this name was circulated. Now, everyone has forgotten its original name, and it is called Arena, uniformly. Because this place is too suitable for fighting. The surrounding area is open and sparsely populated. Looking east from here, the town is a few miles away, and there are no buildings around it, independent of the headquarters building complex. With such excellent innate conditions, this place is naturally regarded by the Navy as the best place to learn from each other. No matter how lively the fight is, there is no need to worry about hurting innocent people. At this moment, a thin figure sat cross-legged in the center of the arena, with a long sword lying across his lap, syncing along with his breathing. In the auditorium on Hans's left, several figures stood there. Among them are officers who are responsible for refereeing, but in addition to them, there are former generals Zephyr, Flying Squirrels, Huo Shaoshan and several other lieutenants, as well as naval hero, Tek and Garp. In the past 2 years, the world of One Piece has been relatively peaceful. The 4 emperors can't touch it, the Chihuahai can't touch it, and the new pirates won't be as pervert as the year Luffy went to sea. Many things can be handled by the branch, so everyone has more leisure time. Hearing that Loya was going to duel with Bibi Hansa of the elite battalion today, Flying Squirrel invited familiar generals to watch the battle, and also invited the referee. Its purpose is self-evident. He wants Loya to show himself more in the high-level Navy and lay the groundwork for the future. The tempers of the two are in harmony, and Loya also feels close to the first person he meets in this world, so the relationship between the two has always been good. Since there is a chance for Loyado to show his face, the Flying Squirrel will of course do so. Even if it's not for friendship, they are both disciples of Zephyr and they should help each other. When the time came to 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Hansa closed his eyes and opened his eyes inexplicably and looked towards the fortress. A second after Hansa raised his head, Garp, Zephyr and others sensed Loya's approach. Surprised by this, Garp asked, "Hey, Zephyr, isn't Hansa's observation hockey's range of perception that big?" "Well," Zephyr nodded, "just like when you hunted down Roger, it should be an intuition between opponents." Garp scratched the back of his head and shrugged, "It shouldn't be that exaggerated." A figure passed by quickly in the air, and in less than a breath, it came to the center of the field from a distance. After landing, it was silent and light. "I didn't expect this elite camp to have a genius who has cultivated to such a degree. This is probably the best guy in the past, right? It looks like this, Flying Squirrel, is he Loya?" The person who spoke was a man with a big beard and a cigar. Judging from the military emblem on his cloak, he was also a lieutenant general, and it was the lieutenant general of the headquarters Huo Shaoshan. Hearing this, the Flying Squirrel with his arms folded frowned and whispered, "It's him right. But, what's wrong with his injury? We've agreed to duel today, why didn't he rest in peace?" Burning Yamanaka will make a light snort and look carefully. Indeed, Loya in the field is indeed in a bad state. The original clean recruit's shirt was full of mud, and the clothes still had sharp sword scratches. Looking through the cut in the clothes, you could even clearly see the deep bloodstains of the nails inside. With daily exercise, Loya's baby face gradually reduced fat and became tough and straight, but the abrasions on the corners of his mouth and face made him look very embarrassed. The ring finger of the left hand was bent unnaturally, apparently broken. Seeing Loya's tragic state, Zephyr asked in a deep voice, "Loya, who attacked you?" At this moment, Zephyr's face was extremely gloomy, his eyes were out of focus, and his arm muscles trembled involuntarily, which was an expression of ultimate anger. In his opinion, Loya's strength is not to mention the elite battalion. Generally, the lieutenant general will not be able to please him. Apart from being attacked, is there any general shot? Luoya is his most important disciple, who would dare to beat him like this? Attack. Although the blood from the scratches on the sharp sword in the chest has stopped, but with the vibration of the chest when he speaks, a heart-piercing pain hits, making Loya almost unable to stand still. Stopping Zephyr from approaching with his hand, Loya took a few breaths and straightened his back. "No one attacked me. It's just that I picked your elite camp just now, and I suffered a little injury, don't worry." Quote. Selected. Elite camp. Zephyr was stunned for a moment, then his eyes widened in disbelief. "You mean all of them?" "Of course. Or one-on-one, teacher, who do you think can hurt me?" Loya grinned, revealing 8 shiny doors Kiba. Wow! In the audience, the pot exploded in an instant, and the generals present showed a look of surprise. "Oh, this is really..." Huo Shaoshan sighed. "No matter how weak this class is, it is still an elite battalion, and all of them are geniuses selected from the middle of the recruits." Most of the generals present came from the elite battalion under Zephyr and had a deep understanding of the elite battalion. Don't look at the rumors that the new generation of Navy is not as good as the past. The strength of the elite battalion is not what ordinary people can imagine, and everyone in it is a monster in the eyes of ordinary people. Hearing Loya's words, these generals were surprised, but also a little dubious. However, as Tony and the others supporting each other slowly appeared at the edge of the line of sight, everyone was silent. Compared with Loya, they look even worse. All of them had wounds on their bodies, and a few guys even limped forward, leaning on crutches and being helped forward. The blood oozing from the wounds stained Yuhi's bandages, and with every step he took, there was a lot of cold sweat on his head. Aludo, a formidable little giant, was lying on a rudimentary cart and was pushed by his less injured companions. Brother Jerome was hanging by one hand, and the thick plaster had not yet fully solidified. "I thought you guys stayed in the infirmary to recover, but I didn't expect you to be able to stand up." Feeling the sight behind him, Loya turned his head with a smile and looked at them. Tony pushed aside Simon who was supporting him, and with a scabbard and pestle, he approached the arena with difficulty step by step, walked to the edge of the platform, and clenched the Kiba pass to climb onto the platform. Loya didn't know what he was going to do, and looked at him blankly. Tony walked over to Loya, took out a roll of bandages from Kabuto and handed it over. "Wrap it up, the wound will open." Loya looked at the bandage on Tony's hand silently, and suddenly, slapped it out, and said with a wicked smile, "No need. This is my own choice." After a pause, Loya turned to look at Hansa. "Besides, even if I am injured, are you sure that Hansa can defeat me?" Tony couldn't help being dumbfounded and gave up persuasion. Now, Zephyr has a general understanding of what happened. Loya's strength is well known in the elite camp, and the old members know very well that Hansa will never be Loya's opponent. If it was just an ordinary sparring, everyone would still be laughing waiting for the duel to end, taunting the loser. However, Hansa's body is probably no longer able to support this level of battle, and may collapse at any time. That is, will die. For this group of recruits, the death of their companions cannot be ignored. Because the duel could not be stopped, Tony and the others had to choose another method. That is to weaken Loya. Don't know why, they just hope that Hansa will win. Chapter 55 Victory. You didn't refuse. Zephyr looked at Loya with deep eyes. It is impossible for Roha to be unclear about the thoughts of his companions. For the sake of friendship, Loya resolutely chose to accept the challenge, and even took the initiative to ask all members to be together. That's the whole elite camp. Although most of the members' rank after graduation will only hover below the school official, their strength will not be faked. Even the lieutenant generals cannot guarantee 100% that they will retreat completely in the face of their siege. As Loya said, one-on-one, no one will be his opponent. But quantitative changes cause qualitative changes, one-to-many. If you don't use a large-scale ultimate move to clear the field, injury is inevitable. At this moment, Zephyr and the others were all mumbling silently, watching the field quietly. Shocked by Loya's courage, and regretful for this friendship, Hansa has been listening silently until now, and then slowly said, "Cough. Thank you, Tony, you can go back. The next battle belongs to me and Loya." Tony heard the words, bit Kiba unwillingly, and turned to leave. The two stood face to face, staring at each other. Around Loya, the cold air began to roll, and a thick layer of ice armor shrouded him. On the opposite side, Hansa pulled out his long sword, clenched his hands vertically, and pointed the tip of the sword straight at Loya. Zephyr nodded to the referee behind him, indicating that it was time to start. The latter saluted, stepped forward, and announced loudly, "The game, 3, 2, 1, start. Laugh. Almost as soon as the referee's voice fell, Yu Kiba suddenly appeared in the field, and Ling Lai's sword energy surged out. Yu Kiba came and went silently, and at the next moment, Hansa maintained the posture of drawing a knife and appeared in front of Loya. One blade flow moonlight slash. This is my arc slash. Under the stance, Tony suddenly widened his eyes. Although the momentum of the move just now changed, it was indeed his correct move. Zephyr has been paying attention to Hansa. Seeing him use this trick, he sighed faintly. Even at the end, did you choose this way, Hansa? Hansa's sword is very fast, much faster than the other elite swordsmen in the elite battalion. The speed is also fast, faster than Loya. But even so, it still didn't hurt Loya. Hansa knew that before he hit Loya, he had already moved away with a shave, and what was left in place was just his afterimage. Already, have you seen through these moves? Hansa froze. Observation Hockey suddenly began to warn, and immediately turned around and cut the sword out. Clang! The harsh collision sounded, making everyone in the audience palpitated. Because if Hansa's speed was a little slower, the sharp crampons on the flying Loya fingers would pierce his neck. Seeing that he couldn't make a sneak attack, Roja's figure in midair swayed, avoiding the sword pressure bursting from the blade, and fighting head-on with a swordsman who was comparable in strength was not a wise choice. So he quickly came to Hansa's side, and 3 silver-white vacuum slashes stuck to Hansa almost at 0 distance. Lanjiao Sanryu. In the face of Loya's powerful Lanjiao attack, Hansa's expression remained unchanged, and he danced the long sword out of the afterimage, and slashed out after accumulating power. With 3 clangs, 3 vacuum slashes were smashed into the body forward. Strong. After defeating Loya's slash abruptly, Hansa took a deep breath, suppressed the trembling of his hands, and the fighting intent in his eyes became more intense. The standard long sword in his hand made a humming sound, and his whole body turned into a sharp sword that was unsheathed. Shave. Hansa stepped forward and appeared in front of Loya in an instant. The long sword went from bottom to top and slashed out diagonally. Take me a trick too. Mantis hunting sparrows. A sword swung out, and a terrifying sword force locked Loya. At the same time as the sword slashed, the sharp sword intent that rushed to the face cut through the ice armor and cut on Loya's face, causing him to feel a burst of pain. How do praying mantises hunt finches? Lock, pounce, tear. Rip through feathers and skin with serrated forelimbs, cut open the trachea, and hunt chaffinches. Loya is now the chaffinch being hunted. He once again felt the pain of being locked by the sword. Like Tony's trick, Hansa's attack gave him an unavoidable feeling. But unlike Tony, attacking Hansa with this intensity does not require concentrated energy. Facing such a terrifying move by Hansa, Loya's expression was calm, neither dodging nor evading. His fingers were wrapped with blue force, and the diamond-shaped magic pattern on his wrist wandered along his body. Ice Dragon's Broken Kiba. Laugh. When the cold light suddenly appeared, Hansa watched in amazement as his slash was broken, and the air was filled with countless sharp sword chi, which cut the ground with scratches. But before he had time to think about it, the terrifying strange force spread to him along the blade, making Hansa feel stuffy in his chest, and a trace of blood spilled from the corner of his mouth. It's terrifying power. He used shaving again to leave, and then, Hansa swung his sword straight, and a sword energy was condensed and formed, like a machete, lashing towards Loya in the air. Kacha. Loya smashed the sword energy with a backhand punch, and the light blue energy circulated on the fist. He raised his fist to his mouth and blew off the ice chips on it. Your strength is really good. Strength, speed, swordsmanship and observation hockey are all top-notch. But unfortunately, that's all. Saying that, Loya looked at Tony and the others in the audience and chuckled. Don't you think that my strength is what you see? Everyone bit their lips unwillingly and stared at Loya stubbornly. They don't know it, but they have been seeking psychological comfort. Although the battle between the two was only a few short moves, the unmatched feeling had already taken root in their hearts. Fight against Zaixia, Please don't look around. Hansa's tone could not be heard of joy, anger, sorrow and joy. The pale complexion and the empty eyes made people shudder. Well, just play as you like. Loya smiled, threw himself forward, and fought with Hansa. In the stands, Zephyr shook his head regretfully. Hansa was a pure swordsman, which gave him unprecedented enthusiasm to challenge the strong. He was not for any name, prestige or military rank, but simply to become stronger. Become stronger. This makes Hansa's sword grip tighter than others. But God is not beautiful, his body is really bad, and every time he develops his physical potential, he is struggling on the line of death. Facing a physical monster like Loya, it's not a little bit of a loss. Loya is much better than Hansa. If things go on like this, Hansa should lose soon. Huo Shaoshan said with a cigar in his mouth. The flying squirrel beside him nodded and said, "It is true." However, Hansa has long been determined to die. If a person is no longer afraid of death, the power he exerts is absolutely terrifying. It is not too early to draw conclusions about who will win and who will lose in the battle. Quote. In just a few breaths, Loya fought with Hansa hundreds of times. He didn't rely on magic to fly a kite because he respected Hansa's choice. Pure swordsman, rare. Vigorous death is the destination. Being bombarded to death by his own skills, he couldn't forgive himself. But, it's over. With the repeated fights, the physical differences between Hansa and Loya gradually revealed, and the strength of the counterattacks became weaker and weaker. Loya didn't give Hansa any time to relieve his breath at all, moving around beside him, dodging the blade while launching a storm-like attack, making Hansa tired of blocking. There is a difference in speed between the two, but they cannot be suppressed, and Hansa has never been able to get rid of Loya. After another fight, Loya suddenly exerted his strength, retracted his claws into fists, and swayed Hansa's long sword, but at the same time his shoulder was also cut, and blood was flowing. There was a crack in the hard ice armor on the shoulder, and bits and pieces fell to the ground. Sure enough, I can't stop the swordsman's slash. Loya was not surprised that Hansa cut off his ice armor. The swordsman who has understood the profound meaning of slashing iron can even cut open iron blocks. The hardness of his ice armor is almost a little harder than that of ordinary iron blocks, but how can Hansa be an ordinary swordsman? Still, the injury makes sense. Facing Hansa with the empty door wide open, blue energy wrapped around his fist, and the cold air directly froze the water vapor in the air, making him look like he was shrouded in frost. Ice Dragon's Iron Fist. Boom. The dull crash sounded, and Hansa, who was caught off guard, opened his mouth and spat out a mouthful of bloody yuhi-colored ice crystals, and his body was directly knocked out. Boom. The walls around the edge of the arena were smashed, and rubble flew high into the sky and then fell. Is it over? In the stands, everyone looked at the smoke-filled fracture, not too surprised. Loya's strength is unquestionable, and Loya's files have been circulated among the high-ranking Navy. Although most of them are his records of troubles, there are almost no doubters about his strength. Chapter 56 Defeat Hansa. 3 more for recommendation, for collection. At this moment, Zephyr suddenly said, "It's not over yet." Everyone was shocked when they heard the words, and they all looked at the location of Hansa. As expected, Zephyr had just finished speaking, and from the smoke, several machete-shaped sword chi shot out, scattered the smoke and dust, and rushed towards Loya. Looking at the movement trajectory of the sword energy, it was obvious that the range of Roja's dodge was taken into account. But why hide? Fighting skills with me, are you so incapable of thinking about it, Hansa? The corner of Loya's mouth grinned, and his hands were slammed together in front of his chest. Ice Make Overlord Halberd. Kacha kacha. With the crisp freezing sound, a spurge with a length of tens of meters appeared almost instantly beside Loya. The halberd is so huge, even if the height of the six-tile practice has skyrocketed to 2 meters, the current Loya still looks so small next to the halberd. With both hands, he hugged the tail of the spurge, and Loya waved it, smashing Hansa as fiercely as the Jinchuriki column of the sky. Along the way, countless sword chi collided with the halberd, and shattered at the slightest touch. The imposing manner brought by the huge size, hardness and weight is amazing. The halberd fell to the ground, like an earthquake, making a deafening thunder. In the direction of the fortress, near the windows of the arena, several glass panes shattered in this strong vibration. Zephyr in the stands held his forehead and listened to the sound of chickens and dogs jumping in the fortress, and sighed helplessly, "Can't you change to a move with less movement?" Flying Squirrel quietly approached Zephyr and persuaded, "Teacher, Loya's ice bomb is more moving. Rather than worrying about this, we should consider the aftermath. It is more realistic." Zephyr squinted at him, his face as dark as armament hockey. "You get out." Loya in the stance didn't care so much, and before he could check his results, he suddenly pulled out the halberd and swept out. If it is other people, even lieutenant generals, it is very difficult to swing such a huge ice jinchuriki column to attack. Even if they can swing it, the speed must be slow, and it can be easily avoided. But the biggest difference between Loya and them is his strength. A month later, the Loya energy stage has only increased by 1 level, but the dragon's body has reached 29%. Just a 1% difference, you can enter the 3rd stage. When thinking about the elite assessment, the strength increase brought by the 39% dragon body can make Roja and the silverback great ape just ahead of the curve. Although it has not yet entered the 3rd stage at this moment, the powerful increase brought by the 29% dragon body has made Loya's strength difficult to match. With enough strange power blessing, even such a huge ice halberd, it is naturally relaxed and comfortable to swing, and the momentum is like a thunderbolt. This caused Hansa to give up the attack and jump up to avoid the spurge. Otherwise, if you get hit by this thing, let alone counterattack, a broken bone is a good thing, and it is possible to be hit to death. Hansa, who jumped up into the air, was so noticeable that Loya naturally found him too. He clasped the spear with his left hand and held it beside him. He released his right hand and spread it out, aiming the palm of his hand at Hansa in the air. "Ice make ice bomb. Burst. Call out. Shoo shoo." A diamond-shaped ice bomb was fired, blocking Hansa's movement space. "You bastard!" Zephyr at now Long Guan Kiba roared. Seeing this, Hansa's eyes narrowed, and the long sword in his hand slashed out. One knife flow, breaking the lan. A tens of meters long blue sword chi accompanied Hansa's movements, like a waterfall falling from the sky, directly blocking the advance of the ice bomb. Tony felt something. Yuhi narrowed his eyes, watching Hansa make his move again. Under the sword, the earth cracked. Whether it was an ice bomb or a halberd, it was cut in half by this sword, and a deep ravine appeared on the ground, and the solid stone slabs were all shattered. "Oh, that's right." Seeing such a terrifying attack from Hansa, Loya grinned, dropped the ice jinchuriki column in his hand, and appeared in front of Hansa in a flash. But a flaw is revealed. The hands stretched back were claw-like, and a crazy smile appeared on Loya's face. Finger gun ate children. The next second, endless claw shadows appeared, bursts of explosions in the air, and the sound of gold and iron symphony sounded from time to time. In the face of Loyana's attack that was as fast as ultimate, Hansa, who had just been able to recruit in the future, could only reluctantly. The dense pair of spelling sounds mixed together and turned into a continuous piercing screeching sound. Click. It was the sound of steel breaking, and Hansa sighed with a sullen face. Is the difference so big? As the long sword broke, the body was submerged in the shadow of the claw. Hansa. Hansasen. Tony and the others shouted, anxiously looking at Roja who was attacking. They wanted to stop it, but the sharp airflow around Roja was not something they could approach, let alone interrupt the attack. Zephyr was the only one who concentrated and felt the breath of Hansa. Then he appeared in front of Loya in an instant, the black domineering wrapped around his arms, and two big hands, one left and one right, grabbed Loya's wrist. He is very familiar with Loya's trick. He developed it bit by bit. Once used, it can't be stopped until it loses inertia. Only positive resistance can stop it. Grabbing Loya's hands, Zephyr said angrily, "It's better if you use this trick at the beginning. It's not like you don't know Hansa's physical condition." Luoya, whose attack was interrupted, also sighed with relief. Hearing Zephyr's words, he smiled bitterly. "Hey, Mr. Zephyr. Let's be reasonable. If it wasn't for Hansa's flaws, it would be strange if I could hit him with this move." "What?" Zephyr choked for a moment and murmured silently. Indeed, apart from swordsmanship, Hansa's strongest skill is shaving in the 6 styles. Because he is a swordsman, mobility is always the top priority. The speed of the Hansa light theory, which has been painstakingly researched, has already stood at the pinnacle of his companions. Loya's limit speed is not slower than Hansa, but he still can't catch Hansa. However, now is not the time to worry about these. Zephyr directly slammed forward, threw Loya out, then turned around and used the moon step to catch the falling Hansa. Probing his nose, "It's okay, he's still alive." Just looking at the claw marks on Hansa's body with deep visible bones, he took a deep breath. "Doctor, come and save people." In the evening, a bedroom in the elite camp. Loya, who was practicing cross-legged on the bed, dissipated the ice in his hands, opened the door with an ice line, and looked impatiently at Tony, who had been wandering outside the house for more than half an hour. "If you have something to say, let it go. You still keep people from sleeping." Tony looked at him in shock and thought, "I have never seen such a brazen person. What reason do you have to say this?" However, he quickly packed up his emotions, hesitated for a while, and walked into the house. Today Hansa's behavior is abnormal, and Tony has some guesses, but he can't be sure. He went to ask Zephyr, and Zephyr said that when Hansa woke up, he would ask for himself, and then he kicked him out. But things got stuck in my heart and I felt uncomfortable. Tossed and turned at night and couldn't sleep, so Tony came to Loya, hoping to get an answer. But before he could speak, Loya said directly, "Don't ask about some things. I don't know if you ask me. I, an outsider, really don't understand the affairs of your swordsman circle." After a pause, in Tony's disappointed eyes, Loya persuaded, "Compared to those, you should think more about how to improve your strength. Today's battle with Hansa, which move is the one you can resist now?" "That's right. After all, this sea is respected by strength. Without that strength, don't worry about that." After saying that, Tony bit his lip unwillingly, and his nails sank deep into his palm until blood flowed out. Yes, he is too weak after all. Whether it's Loya or Hansa, it's not an existence that you can contend against. Not counting the two of them, now in the elite camp, he is still at the level of the tail of a crane, and even if he knows about some things, he can't do anything about it. Standing quietly for a while, Tony nodded to Loya and said, "Thank you, then. Farewell." Having said that, Tony turned to leave, and closed the door. It was just that a drop of blood dripped on the threshold, causing Loya to look sideways slightly. Chapter 57. The actual combat mission begins. Does Loya really not know the purpose of Hansa? No, of course he knew. In fact, Tony knew, but he didn't know why. About this, Loya doesn't know. As he said just now, as an outsider, a swordsman, a pure swordsman, what he was thinking, he didn't know Akatsuki. Loya didn't know why Hansa had a soft spot for Tony and chose to teach him his kendo before he died. Even if he was caught by Loya, he had to show Tony his understanding of his moves. Could it be that the Hansa has the goodness of Longyang? So he took a fancy to Tony. Thinking about the strength comparison between the two, Loya suddenly felt some sympathy for Tony. Of course, these are all speculations. Except for the party Hansa, I am afraid that only Zephyr knows the specific situation. Never mind, I'll honestly upgrade and see what's going on with this system. Thinking of this, Luoya silently read the golden finger, opened the panel, and checked his current attributes. Name, Christopher Loya. Energy stage, second order 8 layer. Energy value, 135 1,200. Mana, 10,000 10,000. Mana recovery speed, 950 per minute. Dragon strength, 9%, dragon body, 29%. Conscience writer, do not steal word count. Today, through the battle with Hansa, Loya's energy value has increased by 30 points, which is a good gain. You must know that the entire elite battalion was singled out, but only 50 points were obtained. Loya found that the increase in energy value is actually not as simple as imagined. He has long known that he will gain energy after being taught by others. In addition, fighting with people, whether winning or losing, will also gain ability points. But reality is not a game, and the amount of experience points to gain for defeating a target is fixed. On the contrary, this data is not fixed at all, and it can be said that there are still great fluctuations. Just like Tony, a month ago, in the battle of hundreds of 1vs, Loya only got a symbolic energy value after defeating him. After defeating Tony today, Loya was surprised to find that the energy value had become 5 points. If there is any difference between Tony and a month ago, I am afraid that there is only an increase in strength. With the guidance of the swordsman Hansa, and sufficient logistical support, Tony after a month is no longer the master of the kendo hall who relied on the mystery to eat before. Whether it is basic physical fitness or swordsmanship, he has obtained extremely high. Big boost. But after defeating Aldo, he now only has 3 energy points, which is far from the 30-odd points he obtained in the first battle. Although Arudo can't keep up with Tony in strength, but why is it all rising, more than twice as strong as Tony? Why is it still decreasing again and again? This point, Luoya can't understand. He is very hopeful at this moment that there is a cute system elf in his own system to answer him. In addition, the increase in the power of the dragon is beyond Loya's expectations, from 6% to 9%. It's simply unscientific. During this month, he was obsessed with the study of the 6th form of the Navy, not to mention dragon-slaying magic, and he did not even use modeling magic much. This made Loya very entangled, not to mention dragon slayer magic. I haven't even used modeling magic, why are you rising so fast? In addition to the rigid requirements of exceeding the limits of the human body, the biggest difficulty lies in the control of the body. As long as you have a certain level of control over your own body, and then understand the basic cultivation methods of the 6 forms and the points to pay attention to, you will be able to learn quickly. It's just that this is precisely the reef and dangerous shoal that checks and balances countless passers-by. Not to mention iron block paper painting. These moves that require full control of the body, just shaving this simple leg move, can't be learned. The reason is that they lack control over their bodies. In the original book, The Battle of Judiciary Island, just knowing the principle, and turning on the second gear, Luffy, who has shaved, without a teacher, can only say that he is hanging up. To paraphrase the Straw Hat, because I'm the rubber guy. With the elasticity of the rubber itself and the increase brought by the second gear, Luffy immediately learned and started to use shaving. What else could he say other than hanging up? The will of the universe. Loya is not rubber. In order to learn the 6 forms, he has not left the training room except for shit this month. Focus on improving your control over your body and never get distracted. As a result, the power of the dragon still rose by 3%. What is this? It's unreasonable. Turning off the system, Loya angrily took out the kitchen from the bottom of the bed, heard that it was the turtle soup prepared for tomorrow, and took a greedy breath. Forget it, there will always be a day when the truth will come out. Now, have a good meal. Half a month later, in the courtyard of the elite camp. In the large garden of the courtyard, the exercise equipment that used to be everywhere disappeared, and was carried indoors as early as yesterday. The afternoon sun was scorching hot, hitting everyone's faces, leaving sweat on the forehead, making people feel as if insects were crawling, so they could not wait to scratch it with their hands. But no one dared to do so, all of them stood in the queue with serious expressions. Because in front of the team, on the steps of the attic, Zephyr was announcing the candidates for this actual combat mission. The actual combat mission of the elite battalion is not free to receive, but after careful consideration by Zephyr and the Lieutenant General of the headquarters, a list is formulated to determine the candidate. Although the experience brought by actual combat can make people grow rapidly, this method is not suitable for everyone, and naturally cannot be freely obtained by the mood of elite battalion members. Like Hansa, who is still unconscious in the medical room, he no longer needs to practice through actual combat missions. Rather than having that idle time, it is better to meditate. Maybe once you have an epiphany and figure out some joints, your strength will soar. Of course, this is also related to the fact that Hansa's body cannot continue to develop its potential. The rest are not as lucky as Hansa. In Zephyr's view, everyone present is a rookie and needs a lot of actual combat experience to enrich themselves, including Loya. Listen to me, the candidates for this actual combat mission have been determined. The first one, Loya. 2. DQ. Yes. Loya stepped forward reluctantly and stepped out of the team, with a sad expression as if he was about to sacrifice himself in the next moment. Sure enough, there is still no escape from this disaster. Loya lamented, "If you go on a mission, living on board for so long will really kill people." Seeing Loya's face, the corner of Zephyr's mouth twitched quickly, then put it away, and continued to roar loudly. Roja, who was standing in front of the team, could even see the sweat dripping from Zephyr's forehead as he spoke. The second one, Arudo. The third one, Minged. Fourth, Tony. After Tony stood up, Zephyr put away the form, put it in the creaking nest, and glanced at the 4 strangely shaped disciples in front of him. The position of the 4 is very interesting. Loya is the first to get out of the line, so he stands on the far left. He has a slender body, but he is not thin, and his baby face has been removed to make him look very masculine, which is the most normal one. Then, there was the little giant Aludo, standing there. His tall figure regarded the Jerome brothers behind him as a stern umbrella, a perfect 10. After that, Minged was a little shorter than Tony, and his height was around 180. But his height belongs to the style of gangsters. The recruit uniform is worn on the body and fits tightly, revealing the curves of the bone frame that are not mainstream. The nose of the plane on the head is facing the sun and acts as a sunshade mirror. On the far right is Tony. He is not too tall. His muscles are stronger than Loya's, and he looks very stocky. With the scary scar from his forehead to the left side of his face, he can play the boss of the club by changing into a black suit. Fortunately, the world of One Piece generally does not look at face. Except for the Empress. Starting today, you will go out to sea for actual combat missions for 3 months. The team leader this time is Loya, and you can put forward your opinions now. Hearing Zephyr's words, the corners of the 3 people's mouths twitched, and they shouted neatly, "No." If you have an opinion, Loya's small-bellied character will be wearing small shoes. Teacher Zephyr, you have ulterior motives. Chapter 58 Wave Breaker. I wish all the students of the college entrance examination, a hair into the soul. Victory. Opening parenthesis. Backquote. Victory. The actual combat missions of the elite battalion are generally divided into 3 categories. The first is the assessment that must be passed when applying for graduation. It is possible to apply for 3 warships to go out to sea together with the supporting, correct, soldiers. The person participating in the assessment will be the captain and lead the fleet to destroy or capture the target. The difficulty is the highest, and it tests a person's overall strength the most. In addition to the graduation assessment, the remaining 2 types of actual combat tasks will be much simpler. The first type is that Zephyr personally leads the team to go out to sea, and the safety is the most guaranteed. But because of that incident a few years ago, Zephyr has not personally led the team out to sea for a long time. The other type, this is what Loya is currently encountering, arranging a few to 10 elite battalion members to form a team to go out to sea to perform actual combat missions. Although it is an actual combat, for the safety of the members, the number of accompanying warships can also apply for up to 3 ships, and there can be a maximum of 1 lieutenant general among the accompanying personnel. In addition, this kind of actual combat mission will be followed by several warships and depart at a staggered time with the members of the execution, similar to the patrol officers and fellow generals in the elite assessment. Although the average strength of the candidates this time is good, but Loya is on board. Not to mention. In addition, Tony is a real rookie. Whether it is personal strength or commanding the army, he is a rookie. If he is in danger at sea, the real combat effectiveness is only a Ludo and Minged. Considering the personnel arrangement, Zephyr thought about letting Lieutenant General Flying Squirrel or Huo Shaoshan accompany him. But the offer was rejected by Loya. Just like the situation during the elite assessment, when their lives are guaranteed, can they still exert their full strength? The Navy is not a nursing home like the Kiba Tower. It does not have the courage to fight to the death. How can it become the backbone of the Navy in the future? It's better to quit the Navy and go back to your hometown to get married now. Although still a little worried, Zephyr agreed with Loya's statement. After the disbandment, Zephyr told Loya that the new wave-breaking ship he applied for in the science unit had finished its trial voyage and asked him to pick it up. This is good news. Loya's eyes lit up. He grabbed the passphone bug in Zephyr's hand and left the courtyard. The current scientific troop is not the scientific troop that pacifists ran rampant after Dr. Vegapunk transformed Bartholomew Bear in the original book. Although he has already started research on devil fruit and obtained the Datapa, great breakthrough, the time point is still a year or two away. Zephyr's new wave breaker was designed in Vegapunk's spare time, and its power is 5 times that of ordinary warships. Can save a lot of sailing time. Because some admirals are complaining, the turbine power of active warships is indeed more stable than the sail power of pirates, but in many cases it is not enough to form an advantage. This is a great route, and the weather is unpredictable. Sometimes, let alone catch up. If you don't get thrown off, you have to thank God for not being a demon. So Vegapunk designed this warship while conducting pacifist development and research, making it easier for the Navy to hunt down the pirates. However, due to unfavorable factors such as high cost, insufficient firepower, thin skin and large filling, only one wave breaker has been produced since the design was finalized. For this one, it was Zephyr who took the initiative to open up the funds for assembly. The scientific troop was stationed on the edge of Marineford, a bit far from the main fortress. I really want to meet the scientist who is called 500 years beyond human wisdom, but Loya's current destination is not there, but the port. The wave breaker has finished its trial voyage, and is now parked in front of the headquarters fortress, in the huge harbor. When I came to the port, a large naval warship was docked at the port, solemn and solemn. In front of the warship is the huge square and the towering headquarters fortress. This is the Navy headquarters, this is the Navy. Loya greeted the patrolling Navy and soon found the wave breaker. After all, this thing is too conspicuous. Compared with the muscular appearance of other warships, this warship is simply a standard bamboo pole body, which can be found at a glance. Its length is about 100 meters, which is more than half of the average muscle warship, but the width is probably less than 30 meters. Such a strange-looking warship is docked at the port, and the Navy casts doubtful eyes on it from time to time. Where did this ugly thing come from? It's true that the flag is a naval warship, but this shape is too unique. The slender hull is less than half the height of the other warships, and there are 2 tubular turbines hanging on the left and right sides of the tail. After seeing the shape of the wave breaker, Loya has only one idea. Isn't this the legendary Armstrong cyclotron jet Armstrong cannon? The degree of reduction is really high. Loya remembered the emojis he had seen on the internet before. One of them was a stickman with the face of Curator Kim riding the wind and waves on the Armstrong cyclotron jet Armstrong cannon, with a few big characters on it. Big X carry me to fight. Unexpectedly, a funny picture I saw on the internet has now become a reality. Perhaps it was because he stayed in front of the wave breaker for too long. Above the harbor, a man in a white scientific research uniform straightened up, put his hand on his forehead and looked here. Oh, there's someone here, but in that dress, is it a recruit? Blinking slightly in surprise, he greeted the surrounding navy to continue carrying fresh water and food to the warship, and ran over quickly. Roja, who was stunned, heard the movement and turned to look. The man had come to him, took out the glasses cloth, wiped the glasses covered by the sweat mist, put them on again and asked. "Hello, are you the one sent by Lord Zephyr to receive the wave breaker?" He looked at the recruit uniform on Loya and looked up and down. Luoya was uncomfortable for a while, but he stretched out his hand and didn't hit the smiling person. Although the other party's movements were uncomfortable, his tone was polite enough. So he nodded and replied, "Yes. My name is Christopher Loya, a member of the elite camp. Didn't Mr. Zephyr inform you? This is a pass phone bug." After finishing speaking, Loya took out the phone bug that Zephyr gave him and handed it to the other party. Elite camp. The man let out a light whimper, then relieved. Indeed, if it is an elite battalion, it is understandable that the opponent is wearing a recruit uniform. Otherwise, if Zephyr didn't come in person for such a big event as receiving a warship, he would have to send a colonel over to talk about it. But if it's an elite camp, that's another story. Although they are recruits, the strength of this group of people is not much weaker than that of ordinary naval officers, just because they have not graduated and have no military merit. "Lord Zephyr didn't inform us, but this will prove your identity," the man said, took the phone bug over, and took out another phone bug from Kabuto at the same time. He moved the two phone bugs closer together, and the two phone bugs immediately opened their bulging eyes, and they called out one by one and one by one. "Okay, that's it." Seeing this, the man put away the phone bug, tidied up his sweet wrinkled clothes, and introduced himself to Loya. "I almost forgot, my name is Jim Hubbard. Just call me Jim. In the future, I will be responsible for the maintenance of the wave breaker. Of course, as a scientific researcher, I will not go to sea." "Not going to sea?" Loya shook hands with him blankly and asked, "Wait, let me stroke it. First of all, you said that you are a scientific researcher. Why do you want to do maintenance work? Besides, if you're not at sea, what if we need emergency repairs at sea? Navigating the seas depends on the helmsman." "Yes, that's what they say, but don't be surprised at the strangest things you encounter on the great voyages, and emergent repairs happen from time to time. This is a new type of warship. If you don't follow along, will they be repaired by ordinary boatmen?" Chapter 59 Special Task. Thank you for the 100 reward from the book friends. Salted fish will never turn over. Thank you book friends Super Big Coffee for the 100 reward. The college entrance examination has officially started. I wish you all the best of luck. It seems that he has already prepared the draft. After Loya asked, Jim smiled and explained, "Well, slow down, I will explain one by one." He walked directly in front of the wave breaker, stroking the newly painted surface. Although the wave breaker was designed by Dr. Vegapunk, he has been studying pacifists for the past few years, and the entire scientific force naturally follows suit. It revolves around him. The follow-up improvement and finalization of the wave breaker are all done by me. In my eyes, it is like my child, and I put a lot of energy into it. But, because of this, by the time I finished assembling the ship and was about to go back to work, I found that I was no longer able to keep up with the progress of the science unit. Otherwise, I would not have been. It's funny to think about being transferred here to be in charge of maintenance. Quote. Speaking of this, Jim didn't have much sadness on his face. Although following Lord Vegapunk is the honor of my life, I still can't put down the warship. Designing a warship that can conquer the sea is my real dream. Jim's eyes shone with a light called longing. He stroked the wave breaker and said softly, "The wave breaker was built by me bit by bit. I know where every part and every screw on it is. It's my child, and I don't feel at ease at all." Looking at the tenderness in Jim's eyes, Loya smoothed out the pagoda-shaped goosebumps. Fetishes are disgusting funny. But after saying so much, Jim still didn't explain why he didn't go out to sea with them, and immediately asked, Then what? Why did you say you couldn't go out to sea with us?" Feel the wave breaker sailing in the wind and waves on the sea for yourself, isn't it? Can you feel the performance of the wave breaker better? Besides, we are all rude, and there is no problem in fighting and killing. The daily maintenance and repair of warships. Really blind. Hearing Loya's self-deprecating statement, Jim laughed. Ha ha ha, indeed, I'm really worried about handing it over to you guys who can only fight and kill. But this is something that can't be helped. Jim scratched the back of his head a little embarrassedly. Actually. That what? I'm seasick. Loya. Actually, I'm also seasick. Jim looked at Loya in surprise, suddenly stepped forward and opened his arms. Comrade. My dear. The two simply met their confidant and hugged each other with tears in their eyes. The surrounding navy dodged subconsciously to avoid being hurt by Gay. A scientist who dreamed of building a warship that could conquer the sea, a dream of becoming the strongest navy in the world, finally found an organization on this day. Why can't the navy get seasick? Is this a normal thing? The two fell in love at first sight. Ah. It was almost a matter of beheading the chicken on the spot. After being excited, Jim held Loya's hand and pointed to the wave breaker. Brother Loya, in the future, please pay more attention to this warship. Loya also held Jim's hand and patted his chest. Don't worry, Brother Jim, no matter how badly I get seasick, I will only vomit into the sea. The naval headquarters, the marshal's office. Sengoku, who was sitting in the upper seat, took the list that Zephyr handed in, looked at it again and again, and said helplessly, Hey, Zephyr. Are you really going to do this? Zephyr, sitting on the left, took out his cigar, took a deep breath, and replied, Of course, as that kid said, without pressure, there will be no progress. This goal is just within their tolerance. But, that's a big pirate with a reward of 200 million. It's okay if Loya doesn't get seasick, but as he is now, if he meets that guy, he will be killed instantly. The speaker is Lieutenant General, Roasted Sausage, Flying Squirrel. Generally speaking, the goal of the elite battalion actual combat mission is to receive it from the garrisoned Lieutenant General. According to different candidates and information on the sea, a list of tasks is listed and they are allowed to choose. However, because of the particularity of Loya, this actual combat mission directly skipped this link and was personally designated by Zephyr. The flying squirrel did not believe that Zephyr would be so cruel to let his beloved disciples die. But even though he didn't believe it, in the face of this goal, the flying squirrel had no idea in his heart. This is not a little pirate that can be solved by playing around. Even in the new world, the other party is the kind that can be called a number. Teacher Zephyr, think about it again. Flying Squirrel advised. But what answered him was Zephyr's cold hum. What's there to be afraid of for a guy with a bounty of only 200 million? We killed a big pirate with a bounty of 300 million when we graduated. Yes. Then you and Carp were in a coma for 2 months before they woke up. Zephyr was choked for a moment, and he didn't have time to spit out a cigarette and sucked it into his trachea, choking and coughing. The flying squirrel was still worried, and helplessly spread out his hands, but before he could finish speaking, Zephyr slapped the table and interrupted him. Okay. Will I feel bad for my disciple? This matter is settled. Seeing Zephyr's appearance, Sengoku reluctantly took out his seal and stamped it on the list, and handed it to Zephyr. The older you get, the more stubborn you are. Forget it, since you know it, I'm too lazy to care about it. Zephyr, who took the list, grinned and bit his cigar. Hey. Don't underestimate Loya, I have great confidence in him. As long as you are happy. Sengoku sighed. Among the old comrades in arms, Garp had been depressed for so long because of the dragon, and he was already tired. Now Zephyr has entered a state of extremes. It's really not easy to be a marshal of him. Fortunately, Suru-chan, who is currently serving as the headquarters general staff officer, is not out of tune like the two of them. Otherwise, Sengoku really wants to retire early, go back to drink tea, fish, and take care of his life. Flying Squirrel sighed aside, seeing that Sengoku had stamped his seal, he had to stand up helplessly to say goodbye. Elite Camp, in Loya's room. Because he didn't know the specific process of the actual combat mission, Loya asked Aldo to understand the situation. However, Aludo is too big, and the place where he lives has always been a special room, and he can't get in when he is stuck at the door of Loya, so Loya had to find Ming to understand the situation. Then, Tony, who had finished his practice, came over after hearing the news, and a big head came in through the window, crowding the room. After that war, facing Loya, Ming didn't dare to show his mixed habits at all, and explained the process of actual combat tasks to Loya seriously. The above is the general process of the actual combat mission, Ming said, but I suggest that after determining the target, give priority to killing. As I said, after the mission is over, if the arrest is carried out, although the comprehensive evaluation will a little higher, but we are also responsible for escorting them to the advanced city before returning to the headquarters. For those points, staying at sea for a few more days is unbearable for you, Loya. Quote. Hearing this, Aludo and Tony nodded directly. Well, that's right. It will die. Loya also has lingering fears. Thinking about the feeling every time he takes a boat, life is really better than death. But now, his modeling magic has reached a certain strength. If you use modeling magic, like Kuzan, to freeze the sea and move, the magic power can be supported in a short time. It's hard to make a decision now depending on the situation. If possible, closing the target in the advanced city can further increase the prestige of the Navy. Chapter 60 inches the scavenger, Beard. But it's too early to say that. We're going to see tomorrow, and we don't even know who the target is. Outside the house, Aludo's big face was pressed against the window, and he said in a loud voice. Mingda looked at Loya in surprise. Didn't you go to pick up the mission today? Ah, didn't Mr. Zephyr arrange it directly? I went to pick up the new warship this afternoon, and then came back to sleep. Loya explained with his face down. Suddenly, he saw Mingda and Arudo's faces changed. With a chill in his heart. Did I do something wrong? No, it's not. Mingda hurriedly waved his hand, joking, we don't dare to blame you if you really did something wrong, you will be beaten to death. Aludo explained in a timely manner. Loya, you may not have been aware of it when you first arrived. Generally, the actual combat tasks are collected by the executor from the lieutenant general who is in charge of garrisoning the headquarters that month. The difficulty is high or low, and the easiest may be a group of people. The pirate group with 3000 W. Bailey's bounty. If it is a task directly delegated by Mr. Zephyr, the bounty of the target pirates will start at 100 million. Speaking of this, Aludo remembered the only time he performed the actual combat mission assigned by Zephyr himself. At that time, he really thought that he was going to be buried in the sea and had closed his eyes and waited to die. Fortunately, the Jerome brothers arrived in time to rescue them, and the three of them worked together to repel the enemy and save a small life. Loya has always felt that the elite camp is united, thinking that this is due to Zephyr's good teaching. But he forgot how precious the camaraderie is in the world of One Piece, which is full of killing and being killed. Little did they know that this kind of solidarity is a precious friendship cultivated on the edge of life and death again and again. I thought you and Tony were both new members and would not be directly assigned tasks within a year. I didn't expect. Hey, Ming sighed heavily, pessimistic about the task attitude. Loya is strong, but on a boat. During the voyage, in the event of an accident, the three of them would be responsible for protecting him. Apart from Loya, neither he nor Aldo are speed-type players, and they are easily targeted by the opponent. The only swordsman who can keep up with the speed is a real rookie. A month ago, Ming could say that he could beat 10 Tonys with one, and now he can also say that he could beat 5 with one. The gap between Tony and them is too great. So, we're more fortunate this time. Loya rolled the eyes of the dead fish and smiled. Well, Zephyr really takes care of me. Well said. Suddenly, a figure inserted abruptly into the middle of the group, and the strong wind brought Tony staggered, who was caught off guard. This voice is so familiar that several people's ears have long been cocooned, and immediately stood up and saluted. Teacher Zephyr. The person who came was Zephyr, who was still wearing a coquettish purple suit at night and was smoking a cigar. He first glanced at Tony, who was getting up, cut it, and then took out a wanted notice. "That's what you're aiming for this time, scavenger, Beard." As soon as Zephyr's voice fell, Baruto and the others suddenly screamed. "What? Beard? That big pirate with a bounty of 230 million. Haha, it's him." Zephyr laughed and threw out the reward order. Ming hurriedly reached out to catch it, wanting to see the picture on it clearly. But to his despair, the avatar on the bounty was really that Beard, not the one with the same name. In response, Tony took a deep breath and looked at Zephyr seriously. "Teacher Zephyr, I don't think we have enough strength to fight pirates of this level now." Loya didn't speak, just stared at Zephyr playfully, waiting for his answer. Although Tony's words sounded like he was too ambitious to destroy his own prestige, he also told a fact. Roha, the strongest among them, is indeed likely to defeat Beard, but the opponent is the pirates, who will give you the chance to fight against the king. Do you think it's to trouble Luffy and the others? Silly straw hats will jump out happily and beat you up. Believe it or not. As a member of the great pirates, Beard has dozens of vassal pirates under his command. For people like them, the other party can drown them with a single spit. Loya didn't believe that Zephyr didn't take this into consideration, so he was waiting for a reason. Feeling Loya's gaze, Zephyr snorted coldly and said, "Of course I know you can't handle the entire scavenger pirates, but this time is different." As he spoke, he took out a few documents from his arms and distributed them to a few people. "Look at this is a good time to destroy the scavenger pirates." Loya took the information and glanced at it quickly, with an inexplicable smile on the corner of his mouth. Indeed, this is truly a godsend. The scavenger pirates, let alone the Straw Hats and the others, went to sea for their dreams, and even Bucky had more ambitions than them. Because although their name is the pirates, the thing they do the most is to be mercenaries. That's where their name comes from, a group of scavengers, you pay and I'll help you clear the way. And this heaven-sent opportunity is also related to their mercenary status. On an island called Heathville in the South China Sea, a group of pirates occupied the island and overthrew the king there, squeezing the citizens to mine gold for them. Dora, the captain of the pirates, with a bounty of 5500W, is one of the best figures in the South China Sea. This is a gold mine. Although the stock is not too high, the profit from mining is more than 30 billion. In this world, 30 billion Bailey is a well-deserved huge sum of money. Later, the pirate group had serious internal strife because of the uneven distribution of spoils. During the firefight, some citizens took the opportunity to get out of control and fled to the sea, where they were rescued by Beard, who had just completed his employment mission and was about to return to the Great Route. It may be out of hatred, since you all want it so much, then go grab it. Those citizens told Beard about the discovery of gold mines on the island, and as a reward, they hoped that he would help their country. Even if they didn't help, they only needed to burn and kill the sea of unlooted on the island. Just kill the thief. The embarrassing thing is that the Dora pirates were thinking of running away after mining and smelting. Now there is an infighting, and the gold nuggets are still in the palace treasury on the island and have not moved. This is 30 billion Bailey, how can Beard not be moved? In order to gain more benefits, Beard did not spread the news to other ships, and pretended to continue on his way quietly. However, when he was repairing on the way, he quietly brought hundreds of his cronies and followed those people to the island in a small boat. Coincidentally, that country has helped the navy of its branch many times in the South China Sea and has always had a good relationship with the navy. From time to time, members of the royal family come out to visit and connect with each other. Or pay tribute. The 3 months have come again, and the other party has not sent someone to pay for the tea, which made the guys in the branch suspicious, and secretly sent people to investigate, wondering if the other party wanted to get rid of the Navy's asylum, and deliberately stopped tribute. As a result of this investigation, the fun is big. There are actually 2 groups of pirates on the island. One of them is the famous scavenger Beard in the New World. Beard, who caught the Navy spy, bit Kiva and ordered his men to go to the Navy branch in an attempt to kill people. However, everyone guessed it. The Navy is not a closed island kingdom, and their means of communication is ridiculously fast. Almost less than half an hour after the base was destroyed, the Navy headquarters received the news.